Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, agnosticism, atheism, antitheism, antireligionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudohistory, pseudomorality, things that are found in religion. I support realism, axiology, of course, liberty, justice, ethics. I am also an anarchist socialist. I support anarchism and socialism, progressivism, liberalism, philosophy, psychology, archaeology, and anthropology, advocating for sexual, gender, child, secular, LGBTQIA+, race, class rights, and equality. So if you can guess from all that, I support or challenge that I have an eclectic variety of videos on a variety of topics. Please take time to check them out, as well as if you enjoy them, please give them a like. And don't forget to subscribe, as new things are on their way all the time for my channel.
Hey.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, for sure. How's it going?
Yeah, it's been a while. But good things are worth waiting for.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so I wanted to say that I really appreciate all that we've been doing, and that I definitely want to do more stuff in the future. And I was telling you about that video. What I was thinking is some of the stuff I say is so hard, I just can't talk about it. So I thought the better thing is that, like I said with that one video, maybe it's an hour, I don't know. That one
like
I said a long time ago.
Yeah, that's Sumerian. Yeah, I watched about half of it.
I watched like 3 times.
Okay.
Well, that's just the kind of person I am. Because I know that it relates to the stuff I really want. I'm like, oh man, this is,
For sure.
You watched it once though?
I watched it about halfway, and then I, set it aside because I'm going to come back to it later. I don't have much time for that.
See, that's all I was trying to say is that I don't know how to do it, but you probably do in the StreamYard or whatever. But what I was going to say is what I would like to do is maybe in the middle, if you can, play a little of the video so that we could see it.
Yeah. Yep.
Stop it and then talk about it.
Yeah, I can do that.
I don't really care about, of course, the whole thing.
Right.
Like, he talks about a lot of shit I don't give a flying fuck by. Well, I'm just saying, like, blah, 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 cut out. I don't care. I need to talk to you. That's what I was going to say. We're going to have to watch it together first.
Sure, yeah. And then set times.
And cut it up, because I only want, especially because I want to make the video about me explaining stuff, not listening to him fucking talk.
Right, yeah. And, yeah, you want it to be our content, not...
So people can know what we're talking about.
Right.
It's like the millet. When I say, oh, it's connected to China, people are like, China? It sounds crazy. And they're like, well, did you know that millet farmers, they now know scientifically, are responsible for all languages?
Right.
Or at least, for 100% sure, all languages almost in all Europe and Asia. So, I mean... And then probably like 30% of the ones in America or something. I mean, or maybe more. Maybe even the African languages are also theirs. I mean, it is fucking insane how much importance what I'm trying to say is, because once you do it, then the pyramids and all this bullshit starts making sense.
Right.
It's not separate things. It's a monomyth that everybody interprets themselves. Like religion now.
Yeah.
So, no different.
Yeah, so basically the same thing is what's going on.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. That's why I said we need to talk about stuff. What the video, and basically make 10, videos, hour or whatever, on this 1 hour video. But for us, we're going to cut it up, maybe only use 20 minutes.
Right.
We will not use the old app. I 100% know that.
Right.
Because I really wanted, when he says, these people did this, and it became king. Stop. Now we're going to talk about it.
Right.
One video. Then the king went in and started to do it. Stop. There's a new other video.
Right.
And then the king did. Stop. Now we're going to talk about that thing. See what I'm saying?
Yep, for sure. Yeah, like
I feel like we need to do one on millet too, because it's so important.
Right.
Because it relates to culture. It relates to religion. It relates to language.
Yep.
And then later, as for capitalism, it relates to behavior, because this, and I know you don't understand. That's why I said we need to do a video, because I know you and other people, they don't understand why is it important. Once you had a food source that did not mold, unlike wheat that does mold, and barley that molds, it does not have this same problem. Millet grows in dry, goes in cold, grows in wet, grows without water, with water. It fucking doesn't mold. Animals almost don't eat it. I mean, except birds. But I mean, it's not as bad as like wheat. Almost every bug, insect in the world wants to eat it.
Yeah.
I mean, like everything wants to eat it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, so you cannot keep that. It molds. It's terrible in that sense.
Right. Right in the storage and
yeah. Well, none of that. Millet, almost, you just pluck it off and can eat it right off of the fucking plant.
Right.
So you can't really do that with wheat. Got the hard shell. I mean, so I'm just saying, you can see why this was so fast.
Right.
And why it's because it grows everywhere. And another thing, too, is that it also connects later to pot.
Okay.
Why pot is everywhere.
Interesting.
Because these motherfuckers smoke weed. Because that's what shamans do. They get fucking fucked up. That's why cocaine showed up in Egypt.
Okay.
I always tell people, no, always think Asia. Never think anyone else. Those motherfuckers did not go north. Motherfuckers north went south. That's always what happened.
Okay.
Almost always, period. Except everybody's kept going back to Russia. In a sense, I told you, to the Golden Mountains for like 6,000 years. In a sense, I just call them powwows, but
okay.
I'm just to give you it's religious, it's cultural, it's ceremonial, like the seasons or something. So it's kind of paganism, sort of. It's just, the first paganism wasn't what we think of as paganism. It was shamanism that had merged with deities, in a sense.
Okay.
Then it slowly becomes less shamanism and more about the deities until finally, But at a certain point, 7,000, that's when really something different happens. The violence and stuff. Well, that's when, to me, the warrior cult mentality starts taking over.
Okay.
Which at first doesn't seem like, how does that relate to capitalism? But it does. Because it's the belief that I am powerful and have a right to take from the weak.
Mm-hmm.
A right. That mentality is capitalism in a motherfucking nutshell. I have a right, when I am powerful, to abuse people that are less powerful. I mean, in my mentality, because capitalism, they always tell you, oh, but it's not a moral system. And I go, I know, that's what's fucking wrong with it.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, wow. I'm glad you started off by saying that, so we can just cut that. It's not moral, so don't ever defend it to me, because it's not moral.
Exactly.
So it's not defendable on a moral thing. Actually, it's a defendable period, unless you just greed.
Well, yeah.
But great then. If wealth concentrating to the small amount of people is the goal, then fucking capitalism is doing great. So
right, but that's not our goal. That's
well, because it's abuse. It's unethical.
Yeah.
I know I'm complicated, right, about everything, but it's really not. I always tell you, it's not complicated. Absolutely, it's like even like you said about the millet. The map is complicated. I got to put more stuff and explain. It's complicated. My was God. I tried to explain it to my wife. That's why I drew the map.
Right.
I tried to explain it to my wife last night and realized this may be just a little bit harder than I'm thinking it is. I'm drawing circles and putting arrows and shit, and she's like going, okay, but this has been like 2 hours as you're trying to explain this. I think you need, And I was like, yeah, true.
I suppose.
But it's easy. Like I said, everything comes from Asia. Done. See?
Yeah.
But then if you really want me to prove that, and to show you why and how and who and what and where and when,
then it takes work.
Fuck. And it takes years of knowledge like I have to understand all that. But someone else could look at DNA and go, oh, yeah, I don't understand. Or go, Damien, DNA shows up here at this time. And I'm like, yeah, I can explain that. You know what that is? So 20,000 years ago, people came from Lake Balka, the Merit culture, who were shamans, okay, and totemists, and animists, because everything always is animist. So I always assume animist is if it's religion, it's animist. So you just mean what else is what you really want to know. For sure, they're animists.
Yeah.
So they're totemists, right? So but the shamanists on Western Europe, okay, were less totemist. They were way feminine. Probably matriarchal, almost more egalitarian, but I mean, to the point that the focus was way different,
right,
than it was in the East. It was man's land.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, big difference. And that they're the ones who live in dorms.
Okay.
Like almost like religious later,
where they're separated and
it's by gender.
Right.
And also, even though to me that both of them had to me a third gender or other genders, I 100% believe that. Because think of this. The first graviton burials 36,000 years ago in Russia, or maybe it's getting close to Siberia, but it's Russia. But I would say Russia, Siberia, because to me these are migratory people. So even if they buried someone somewhere, you need to kind of like understand it might be like 100-mile radius or something, or larger. These people really traveled a lot. And sometimes they traveled for one time. Sometimes they traveled multiple times.
Right.
Either multiple times in their life or multiple times, like, in a short period. I'm just saying, the thing is I'm trying to say is that we always think of everything as because we don't ever move. And you absolutely need to stop thinking that, because that is not what they did before. Shit, all they did was move.
Yeah.
So it's hard to grasp that. But then, like I said, I want to try to help people understand the particulars of things, like what did this and why. Because, it's not that I'm saying this. That's why it's confusing. The step is like an elevator to ideas. Okay, they move across, boom, boom, back and forth.
Okay.
Or up or down. Okay, up or down. They're moving up. They're moving back down. They're moving this way to the east. They're moving to the west. These are the movers, though. The ideas hit this. Like, say, this pyramids probably start in North China or something up there, but probably as mountain kurgans in a sense. They're copying mountains. That's it.
Right.
And then as it goes, later they put burials because they want to bury the sacred mountain because the dragon lives in the mountain. So you're inside the mountain, the dragon, you're going to, and when you go below, you actually go above. I know that's crazy. But when you go in water, you go above. To me, I realized it's all sky burial. And at first, people are like, oh, that's crazy. Oh, really? So when a Christian buries the person in the ground, are they in the ground or are they up in heaven?
Right.
Right? Oh, heaven? Oh, yeah. You mean the stars? Right, yeah. They've been believing for at least about 40,000 years or so?
Yeah.
Okay. But so I think that the ancestors went there. That doesn't mean that, to me, that they automatically had full everything.
Right.
And you see this when you check when they did a study of 33 current hunter-gatherers that live, sort of like, ancient lifestyles, and then check their religions, and 100% animism. And then to me, I checked, because they didn't actually acknowledge it, but I checked, and basically, I can't remember, it was 83 or something percent totemism, 79% afterlife belief, 79% shamanism.
Okay.
I wonder if that has any connection. Well, I would say that it's not impossible for afterlife to become the first one with animism, but like I told you before, you remember, I think, that's why I try to make it clear, animism doesn't see a difference. So there's no other.
Right.
You just further, maybe. Like if you walk, in other words, like if I said there's New York and I'm not there, if I walk to New York, it's a place I could walk to. I'm currently not living there.
Right.
But that's how an animist would be like, what are you talking about? Special lands. Fucking everything is magical. What do you...
Right.
Right? And then Christians would go, oh, that's crazy. Oh, really? So you don't fight spiritual warfare all the time? You're not constantly doing that?
Right.
Oh, right. Doesn't say it in the Bible, does it? Oh, yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's weird.
What's funny to me is how I can say things, and when people first hear it, because they're looking outside of their own religion, they're like, oh, that's crazy as shit.
Right.
They're like, oh, yeah, because drinking blood and eating someone's flesh is totally normal.
Right. That other religious practice, that's weird. This religious practice is totally normal.
But I'm just saying, and sometimes though they'll go like, "Oh, I'm not an animist." Yeah, because you don't worship fire when you light candles,
right?
Or think that water is special by putting people and bathing them, and they become radically born again by water.
Right, they're acting in ways that are animist without realizing it.
That's what I try to explain to people when I use these terms. That's why I try to do the videos, and that's why I try with you explain stuff. Even like now, it's all going to be in the video,
right?
Stuff we're talking. Because I like shooting the shit. Sometimes it's good because people don't get to hear how I think. They see a meme or something, or they hear me talk at a specific thing. They might not hear how I come to ideas. And to me, that's really important because once someone starts telling me how they came to an idea, before I even hear about the stuff or the facts, I may already start doubting it.
Right.
Not because I'm a skeptic. I told you I'm not. But it's rational. If I hear that you use a methodological standard like logic, I'm going to assume I don't have to worry too bad about your conclusion unless it sounds insane. But if you don't use logic, you say,
right.
Oh, I just randomly think, and then I just magically...
Ideas just pop into my head.
and like the one guy told me, Damien, I have proof. This one guy, I have a video.
Okay.
I can't remember if he said it on the video, but I think he did. Where he says he has proof that the God particle is real. And I said, oh, really? He goes, yes, this his, Swami, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, yeah, well, how does your Swami know? Is he a doctor? No. What he did was meditation. I said, meditation? Yeah, he did meditation, and then it came to him that the perfect... I can't remember the whole thing inside.
Right.
Once we start talking, once again, I was like, no need to remember this bullshit.
Wasn't... I mean, maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought that the whole God particle thing was just a misrepresentation of the Higgs boson experiments.
Are you trying to bring logic into this?
I
just told you.
Sorry.
Use logic to come to faith. Come on, dude. Seriously. No, what it is you're correct. They hear a stupid term then they don't actually even do the science or research what the fuck the church is about.
Right.
They just magically make shit up, because they're good at this.
Yeah, that's the trick.
Humans, I mean, I'm not trying to put out any
right.
Humans. Humans are real good at bullshitting.
Yeah, that's right.
It just like it reminds me, there's a thing that's called post hoc rationalization.
Yep. It's a thing we all do.
Yeah, it's a thing that once you've accepted an idea, it's like what's the problem with mine. My stuff, Cory, makes all the academics like squirm because a lot of the shit that they've said, if I'm right, their shit's not true.
Right.
Now, I don't agree when they say about changing history. I won't change history. All I'm doing is explaining it better than it was explained before. Before they said, I think, maybe, it's possible. And I came up and went, yeah, I know where. Here it is.
This is
Here's
what
the
happened.
Science that proves this. Here's some more science that proves that. Oh, they went there. You don't think so? Okay, here's the DNA that proves this. Oh, here's millet that proves this. Oh, here's culture that proves this. Here's language that proves this. Oh, here's myths that proves this.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not enough. I agree. Here's pottery that proves this. Here's horse things that proves this. Here's cattle that proves this. Oh, still not enough? I got more art that proves this. I mean, but to me, that is the difference about me.
Right.
I don't get one piece of evidence that proves what I'm saying and then go, you all have to accept it or else I'm going to get angry. I go, oh, you don't accept it? No problem. I'll make some more. There. Because it's facts. See, that's the difference in my shit and like some other people's crap when they go, like there's a guy. We're going to talk to him maybe. We'll see. I'm gonna send.
Okay.
I'm not gonna be mean though, but truthfully, if you can say things that aren't true, ridiculous, I'm gonna say it's ridiculous.
Right.
So some guy sends me a message. Hey man, I know you're all into history or something. No, he didn't talk about me. He said him. He's all into history. I think that's what he said, and or something. And he wants to share this thing. He knows where all the pyramids and all this. I'm like, oh, you're really like shit that I've explained in my blogs already? Okay. But he goes, I'm sure you'd be interested to find out about them. Like, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
I'd like to hear your theory.
And then he's like, oh, the Nephilim in the Bible. And I'm like,
oops.
Oh, that's not the answer.
So it's like the aliens theory, but with angels.
Exactly. Because he also said they're tall people. And I was going to say something too. Guess what? In North China, shocker, guess what there was? Some tall people. Those tall people went down to Polynesia. Like, where's that? Samoans, right? They're huge.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right. They came from North Asia. So, but once again, I hear people say that like, when they say something, it's like special and scary and But you see, like when I talk about stuff, I'm like, here's this fact, this proves this. Even if you don't agree, I don't get mad. I don't go, oh. I go, okay, let me explain it better. Oh, okay.
This is how I know this. Yeah.
Well, the difference is, I have confidence, but it's not confidence. Like they have confidence, they have belief confidence, which is to me what they have a difference in me. So people understand. There's two kinds in philosophy. Why they don't explain this like all the time. I guess they just assume this, but it should be explained constantly because I know no one gets it. Everybody, like especially not putting people down, but agnostics will say this all the time. We can't know everything 100%.
Right.
And I said, except you know that 100%, correct? Immediately, it has to do with epistemics. You just made a statement you actually cannot justify.
Yeah. That's right.
So that's the issue of philosophy that I want to talk about. So there's two kinds. One is epistemic, which means I can justify, like Damien's shit. Check out one of my blogs. Then you find out what epistemic's like. That's what's epistemic. When every fucking point is fucking proved to the point that it's almost like beating a dead horse. That is epistemic. Well, because that's fucking science.
Right.
It's not, trust me, bro. It's like, no, you don't need to trust me. Fucking read the facts. Then you come and tell me what you think. I doubt you'll have too much of a different thinking than I do.
That's the trouble with like kind of being like a quote unquote skeptic, right? Like it's too often a person is delving on surface level on things that they don't know in depth. And sometimes you have to do that in depth version of explanation and epistemics, so that you can back it up, and you don't just have to say trust me, bro. Right.
Well, because there's two kinds. Trust is bad, and we do trust a lot of things.
Right.
But one is called psychological certainty. Okay. To me, I never care about this. Zero about this. You know what though? Everybody seems to care about this one, especially skeptics and agnostics. They go 100%, and I'm like, okay. Percentages are psychological certainty.
Right.
They mean zero to philosophy. So don't even bring them up.
Yeah.
So never again mention a percentage and think that you're talking about philosophy in a sense. You're talking feelings.
Yeah. You're not even.
You know what philosophy epistemic is? Like I say, when I say it comes from China, and I go, it's the Chatham culture at 7,200 and whatever, and they had millet, and then millet farming was also found to be associated with language spread. And here's the language that came right after it. Here's the thing. Here's the where it went. And look, now we check the DNA. What I'm saying is, it's like you said, it's a magnifying glass checking things.
Right.
But it's building our knowledge. It's really, in a sense, how we science. Then they go, that's why I hate when science doesn't know it down. Oh, fuck. You don't know that, first off. And they go, well, science, look at it. Scientists are not philosophers. And even some philosophers that I've heard talk, I wonder, do these fuckers think? Or are they fucking parrots that have been told what philosophy is, and they just go, they cannot fucking think for themselves. I'm serious as fuck. Because I talk to some of these people, and I'm like, this guy's a philosopher? He's got 30 years, teaches and everything? He can't even fucking fight himself with a wet paper bag with me. And I'm not trying to say, my point is not to say like I'm so great. What I'm saying is, why are people not thinking? That's all. Yeah. That's all. So I'm not like attacking them. I'm saying I'm always shocked because, man, to me, every word that comes out of my mouth needs to have justification.
Right.
So meaning that I feel this constant nervousness that I'm not justifying enough. That epistemic nervousness. You see, it's called epistemic humility. Even though my words are arrogant, the desire to be accurate is my epistemic humility. Now, if you don't have that, then there's a problem. There's people that are willing to believe bullshit. Epistemic humility means I know I don't know unless I fucking know.
Right.
And I won't say I know unless I fucking know. That's why, just like, you do. I'll have a question better. Do you like my socialism? Just ask. Or do you think I have any clue about socialism? Just your opinion.
I think
by some kind of, that I've said something, but a general opinion. Would you feel the way you know socialism? Do I know socialism?
I think so.
Okay, and I've never read Marx.
Right.
In my entire life.
Yeah, one doesn't need to read Marx.
No. So I started reading just the beginning, like the Communist Manifesto. I went, got it. Okay, don't. It's like I say, well, to me, the reason why it's once again, like I was told you before, it's not that I don't see value in learning.
Right.
I just want to make people understand this. And look how hard I work on fucking proving shit. What it is it's like counseling in school. Dude, I went into counseling the day one. The first time I tried to practice counseling, it worked. 2.5 minutes of talking to me, this chick went and changed her life. 2.5 minutes with me on my first time trying counseling. Had never even tried to even do it before. I was that good, that gifted in a sense, without being taught. And that's all I was trying to say too about socialism. I feel like socialism is innate as long as your humanity is first. Your humanity is first, it's innate.
Yeah.
To me, it's like when you don't do it, then it seems odd. Like, what the hell? What do you mean stealing from people weaker than you? That's a bully. What?
Yeah.
Take advantage of people? I mean, it just act like you can run their life? The government's not supposed to do that, but yet you can say how they can act on Facebook? Really? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's outrageous what the power that they have, and we all it's no big deal. That's what I was saying about socialism to me, just in anarchism too. To me, it's self-explanatory. All you got to do is explain how you have values and you matter. And I think you just explain anarchism.
Yeah.
It's this understanding there's no such thing as a group. There's no such thing as a family. There's no such thing as brother. There's no such thing as sister. When it all comes down, what I mean is your experience is personal. Always.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Always. You and me right now are doing the same thing, but our experience is different. You're, in a sense, listening to me and I'm telling you stuff. And then sometimes you could be telling me stuff. But the dynamic is different because of what we're doing. Right. You and me both know, that, as you know, my goal in general always is teaching the public. And then let me make it simple for everybody. Everybody gets confused at what I want to teach in public. You know what I teach in public? To be a good person. That's it. To me, everything else comes naturally.
Yeah.
That's why, because to me, like I think people, and I'm not saying we shouldn't push socialism or anarchism. We absolutely should. I believe people should read stuff, just like I think people should read counseling books. I barely skim them because I was like, yeah, this is not even as good as the shit I can do. Okay, cool.
A lot of this is for kind of intuitive to you.
And then they go, well, Damien, are you sure that you just weren't blowing yourself up? Well, let's see. I didn't read my books. I didn't even study. I spent 15 minutes on a 3-hour test, and I got a 97. So
there you go.
That was the third highest in the class. The highest was 100%, but he took 3 hours. My mind was fast, and he also studied up to I was like out there talking to people, bullshit. He's there studying like before the test, and I didn't do any of that crap. Like, oh, did you read the book? Oh yeah. Well, no, I forgot. But my point is that it's not. That's what I'm saying though. But everyone's not me. I'm not saying that's what I was trying to say.
Right.
Like so that's what I'm trying to say is that sometimes when I say things, don't assume. When I tell you things are good, like learning and kindness, this is because I know this. When I say I don't read, it's because I really don't like to. But if I felt a need, I do, because I read tons of shit that I hate, But I just don't read for fun is what I really meant. I don't I don't go, oh man, I just need to read a book. I'm like, I need to go sit in the jacuzzi, maybe smoke a joint and I don't know, do nothing.
Right. Yeah.
But things have value, and I realize, and that's why I told you before, I don't like when I feel like even leftists, we buy the world's value.
Oh yeah, we've been indoctrinated into too much of it, so that a lot of times it is internalized. Wow.
Huh?
I think I'm very valuable.
Cory?
Yeah, I think I'm very valuable.
Very valuable. See, I agree. You are, and I'm just trying to say is that. But we're taught we're not valuable unless something.
Unless we can produce or
a job or a thing. Or then, of course, then they want to know, but it's not job's not good enough. How much do you make? And then that's still not good enough. How many cars or how many houses or how many? It's a freaking a game almost.
Right.
You know this because I always think if I was a billionaire, let's assume I'm a corrupt. So, hi, I'm Damien AtHope, and I'm an axiological atheist, and I'm a prehistorian, writer, researcher, and a philosopher. And this is Cory. You can go ahead and tell them a little bit about you.
Laborer, podcaster, father, that sort of stuff. So, and
I can't hear you again.
You're muted.
You muted yourself. Oh, about the self people. Yeah. I was saying if I got rich, and I was totally selfish. Why wouldn't if you're a billionaire, why keep working?
Wow,
I'm serious. I would be like, it could just think of this. Isn't the goal like that we're sold that eventually we can retire? Why is it that? But yet the billionaires they just work forever because they're not really working. First off, but they're constantly retired. It reminds me of I had this one guy who's a millionaire.
Whole life is actually retirement. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they kind of. Well, he goes. Because he was selling to me because I was complaining about working hard because I worked like, I don't know, I think I had worked an 18-hour day or something. And I was complaining, fucking tired as shit. And he's like, well, I worked 16-hour days. And I looked at him, I'm thinking, what? And then he's like, oh, for a month. Then I take a month off because I'm tired. I'm like, oh, wouldn't everyone like to take a month off every other month? So you work 6 months out of the year. Whoa.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's similar to like my job, although the boss probably does their 16-hour day often isn't the same as the laborer, but my job, I work 84 hours in a week,
Right.
and then I get a week off. And so in a sense, like I do only work 6 months of the year. It's perfect, actually. It's exactly the way every job should be.
Well, I'm not trying to work off. I was just making a comment that this guy was talking about how he worked hard.
Right.
My millionaire friend. Oh yeah, you took every other month. You go on vacation for a month. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, my wife goes, he has workers. He doesn't do the work. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, he helped sell commercial buildings, but so he did a little bit of stuff. But yes, I know what you're saying, babe. He definitely had workers. He had like 8 of them or something. But anyways.
Yeah.
Beside a friend of my old friend that was a millionaire, he lived in Coto de Casa. You know, like that place where like people go like, where? You know the show, The Housewives of Orange County?
I've heard of it.
That area they lived in is Coto de Casa, where my millionaire friend lived.
Okay.
Nice job if you can get it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
a person of independent wealth and independent means is not a bad job to have if you can get it.
yeah. Well, he made himself sort of in a position to get wealthy. And the fact that he didn't start with $1 million.
Mm.
But as you know, he did transition to the, trying to take more than he was giving. Let's put it that way. But eventually then he met me, and I kept talking all kinds of socialism to him and about caring about people. And all of a sudden he had 2 guys living in his house. I was like, I don't know that I was meaning that live in your personal house, but I'm glad about the effort.
There you go. Yeah.
Every little bit helps, Well, yeah, sorry, we did the normal pandemic thing, by the way, where the first 2 minutes you actually meet somebody, you spend discussing tech problems, right? Where it's I don't know your name, but you're muted right now. Classic maneuvers.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm glad we got to finally set this up. Thanks so much for your patience, and yeah. Are you both in Saskatchewan?
I'm definitely interested in it. I mean, I used to live in Seattle for about 5 years. My wife told me. I don't think about details that much, but so 5 years, anyways. But I went. I think did we go twice or 3 times to British Columbia? Twice. We went twice to British Columbia to the convention up there.
And then one time to the religious. We went to the Vancouver, and then one for the religious cabin.
Oh yeah. Then I was remembering. Yeah. So then I went up to Edmonton. I did a presentation on the evolution of religion, and then on the way back, or it was the way up. I think on the way back is when, the way back, I went to Calgary and debated the Calgary Street Church.
Interesting.
Because I called them out. Because I had.
Is that the one that was downtown that was doing you had to listen to a prayer before they gave you soup kind of thing? Oh, yeah, nothing like Tide Aid to really reinforce your
well, he actually got busted because he went in the Calgary Stampede Parade. He tried to go in front of it and walk with Christian stuff. He got arrested.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's
I didn't know that. I mean, I grew up in Calgary, so but I wasn't really involved in the sort of secular humanist atheist movement when I was out there. And so now I'm getting all these kind of filtering through. Oh, that was going on while I was in high school. What? You start finding out how many your blinders that you had on while you were busy, hunkering down, finishing your degree or whatever, and suddenly you're like, oh yeah, Calgary was a weird place. I mean, not saying that other places aren't weird, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I thought all Canada was more reasonable than the U.S. And, and so
yeah.
Well, still is a little better. Still.
Well, this is the impression that you get, with some of our research, which I'm sure we'll jump into. But you're like, oh yeah, we're better. We're not better, but we're get it a bit more, and we're a bit more accommodating. And then suddenly you peek beneath the curtain of some small community, and you're like, that municipal council just thank God for appointing their municipal councilors. That's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, definitely. Yeah. That's what's really interesting about the religious people to me in general is they're totally, in a sense, two-faced. they want religious freedom for themselves, but they will constantly test in a sense, guides of secularism as much as possible.
Yeah.
In other words, what I mean is to me, secularism is basically everyone's religion or not religion is all equal. In other words, no one's getting any preference. And so, like you said, as soon as we say God, well, you don't also mean atheist, do you? Because I don't believe in that God. And that reminded me one time I was talking about college. I was in college, right, to do counseling. That's what my degree was going to be, was a psychologist. Actually, an interventionist was going to be. But anyways, the guy was talking, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I have a video of this, blah, 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 about spirituality. And I was like, he's like, everyone can be spiritual. And I was like, well, I don't actually believe that spiritually means anything. So I can't be spiritual. And I'm an atheist. So whatever you're talking about just sounds like feelings and, And anyways, he's like, oh, no, you could be spiritual. And then it was so funny because then the leader next to him goes, you just told him what he should think, or something like that. They're like, wow. And I was thinking, but that's what religious do. They don't even care. It's not even ethical. Here he is in the thing teaching. He should now be pushing his religion during teaching. And especially when this is a completely secular class, and I could be atheist as hell. I mean, and my point was that people give, I think, sometimes spiritual, not religious, a complete pass. Where if the same shit happened was Christian or Muslim, but if they were, I'm a whatever, spiritual, non-religious, let's say, they're nothing, they're a non. Yeah, but they still talk this woo-woo bull crap about everything is connected. I'm like, well, kind of. We should care, but I mean, now you're bringing morals and then turn out like it relates to DNA or something. I mean,
well, it's the whole question of like, what is spiritual in the first place, right? And one of the challenges we run into is like in studying religion and its role in society is like, what is religion even, right? Because you've got these cases of like the Church of Atheism out east, and then you've got, in America it's a bit different, where you've got like your Satanists, which who are doing amazing work, right? When suddenly it's like, oh, we're allowed to present to children in schools, great, we've got an after-school Satan program, and suddenly that kind of maybe contextualizes for some of the more religious folks why that might be a problem, but it didn't realize it until then, right?
Yeah.
But of course, this pushes the envelope of like, what is religion in the first place? And that fuzzy line between culture and religion and belief. Like we had this conversation with my research team the other day. I love hats. I wear a lot of hats, figuratively, metaphorically, and every day. And the question, of course, is like, okay, so getting into the Canadian legislature to question time, period, rather. You can't wear a hat unless you have a religious or cultural reason.
You're kidding. You can't wear a hat?
Oh, it took me 45 minutes to get it. You guys ever see that movie, Thank You for Smoking?
I think a long time ago.
This gun lobbyist tries to go through a metal detector, and his friends he's like, go ahead, this is going to take a while, So I'm going to question time, and I'm lined up, and they're like, so you got to take off your hat. I'm like, I no, respectfully, I don't. And they're like, well, look, I'm like, look, you have to have a cultural or religious reason for wearing a hat. I'm like, I have one of those. And they're like, well, which one? I'm like, you can't ask me that. Like, wow. I'm not going to pull up my, and then of course, I waited some time. We had a nice conversation with the head of security, and I got to wear my hat, very tasteful hat, in the legislature. Because, like, what is the difference between a cultural or religious reason? And like, if you like wearing hats because you read it in an old book, or you like wearing hats because like you got a bald spot, or you like wearing hats because they make you feel good or look good, what is the difference?
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
For me, there would be no difference, especially the fact that I don't understand. Like I was talking to Cory about, I don't feel like the jobs have too much rights over us. Like most Americans like freedom, if anyone, but that's not true because they let their job control how they work online, what things they do, what their past was. I mean, it's if they can take a vacation or not. I mean, it's every I'm just saying it. I agree with you. We operate in the system of like, insanity where things that are really not making sense, we're like, oh yeah, totally makes sense. Totally sense. Yeah. In fact, it's the best.
Drawing arbitrary distinctions with things that without explanation, really.
I mean, sometimes that's easier than having a 45-minute conversation about epistemology on the side of the street corner. One has to pick one's battles, of course, but
Oh, well, yeah. That's also, important to get the idea. So when you say the prayer studies that you did exactly,
shall we jump into it? Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, I wasn't sure your normal format. If you want to, how should we jump into it? I guess
we're anarchists. Let's go for it.
Yeah, whatever.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll start by.
You're right. I should explain it. Okay, I forgot. Sorry. Like always, all of us are leaders. To me, a leader, people get confused. A leader is not a person that has a title. To me, a leader is not a person who has a job that puts them in that position. I've seen people that are in the position of what they're called a leader, and they are no leader. To me, a leader is a person that tries to do something that is correct and then guide others to that same correct thing. And so to me, anyone that does this in any field of any kind, including even kindness, someone who guides people to be kind, is a leader. I feel like that well, that's what I was talking about. We limit what we think are acceptable things. Like when people say hero, and they don't realize, they go, well, women are hero too. And I go, okay. The original name hero was a female name. The story is about a female who sacrifices. She's actually a priestess for a goddess. And then this, I can't remember now exactly if it's a human or a god. I think it's a human guy wants to have sex with her, but you're supposed to be a virgin for the priest. I mean, for the goddess. It's because you're a priestess for her. So she eventually, I think, has sex, and then she somehow, then can't be a priestess anymore. So she's ruined her whole life. And then, for a man, then, but then, no, listen. Then she thinks the guy's dead, or is told he's dead. So I think she kills herself. That's why she's a hero. But he didn't really die, and he comes back, and he's mad that she's dead. And anyways, but besides the point, that's craziness. But it's so that's what some actual historians going, oh my god, that was the worst version of that ever. Well, look, I didn't say that it was cultural historian of Greek myths. All I was trying to do was say that people's opinion about what things are cultural. Yeah. So when you said to me, what's religion and culture? To me, really, there is no such thing as religion. It is culture. It is like saying, is language an isolate outside of culture?
No. It's interesting you mentioned this comparison because Laurie Beeman, who's a scholar out east, has been studying this exact point. And there's this, I'm a constructivist. So these are all like culture, religion, they're all socially constructed. We just call them different things.
But, I totally agree. I'm with you.
Laurie's been running this interesting analysis where the fuzzying line between culture and religion has actually been used as a means of introducing things like prayer into things like municipal councils. Mm-hmm. And the argument basically goes, look, we have Supreme Court rulings. We'll jump into those in a bit. We have Supreme Court rulings say that the state can't endorse religion. This isn't religion, it's culture. And so you actually see the argument being used in the other direction. And so it's this fascinating kind of conversation of like, well, no, we know it's religion. Like we know when we see it, you're waving around religious symbols, you're using religious language. But if they say, no, it's culture or it's a relationship, and then suddenly, is that now allowed in a space where religion is not supposed to be, but culture can be, right? And it gets very confusing. So it's interesting how that argument can actually work both ways.
And my answer to that is always anarchism.
Could you elaborate?
Anarchism. The thing is, to me, is not to isolate religions. Fine, let them all be there. But nobody has any difference. To me, that's why I always laugh when people are like, "Oh, there's all these." I don't know if you know, but on Twitter at least, it seems like insane. Like the leftists, like they don't even need the right. The freaking left is attacking each other. I mean, everybody on every level, from the most extreme communist to the most, neoliberal. There's not one of the. I don't do any of that, or try not to, but. There's no safe land that I've seen from any of them. No. I think that's sad. That's to me really, really saying that the same thing though. It's this cultural that no matter who you are, we get into this tribalism, like you're talking about the difference of religion and culture. To me, the difference in religion and culture is a thing that I will do unto myself. Religion is the thing I want to force others to do. I mean, just think. And people go, oh, well, that's just Christianity because it's in power. Really? Because Buddhism, when it was in power in Myanmar, it did terrorism. It actually killed Muslims. It burned mosques down. I think 4 or 5 of them. I probably shouldn't say numbers because
there was a lot of religious violence based. Yeah, I mean,
I don't remember exactly, but because I want to be accurate, and I go, well, maybe I don't know exactly how many, but I remember seeing at least one or two. So, but the point is, the reason, and just like there's a guy who made a Buddha in a bar, right, a sign of Buddha drinking alcohol. They put him in jail because they said that they were disrespecting Buddha, and he's like, what the hell? But so my point is, though, it just shows that it doesn't matter the religion. Look at Hinduism. Hinduism are getting Hindu nationals now. They're freaking becoming like Nazis. Not all of them. I'm just saying that, but there's some people that are becoming more extreme where they're wanting to push. In other words, anytime a religion gets power, it always wants itself to be exclusive.
Yeah.
Well, this is an extension of this is the idea that if you believe that you have your God or your gods on your side, that validates a lot of behavior which we would find reprehensible.
Oh,
and
totally.
So, yeah, it really doesn't matter the religion. Suddenly you're looking around saying, well, we're justifying this based on the mandate or diktat of a deity. Suddenly that validates it much more than, say, we're validating this based on good empirical evidence or, a communal desire to improve well-being. I mean,
totally.
We're I think it's
right. So you're going to the other point. So the other thing that you say why people pray is they think that the prayer has authority because they think that the deity they're praying to has authority over the world.
Well, this is a really fascinating question we tried to explore. So I'll give you a bit of background as to what we've been doing out here. I'm the research coordinator for the BC Humanist Association, and among other things. And we've been looking at legislative prayer for a few years. And one thing that's really interesting was we first started off by looking at prayer in the BC legislature. So every day they start a session of the BC legislature with prayer. And unlike a lot of provinces, their legislature here starts with inviting an MLA to deliver their own prayer of their own devising. And so you can study that infinitely. Right? In Saskatchewan, for example, they read it sort of non-denominational. Again, air quotes will come back.
Right.
Yeah.
But in British Columbia, they read off a prayer that they make up a prayer of their own. And so you can actually study, how religious they are, how non-religious they are. So when we first approached MLAs with like, hey, maybe we should stop doing this. There's been a Supreme Court ruling that says you can't do it at the municipal level. They said, well, no, it's super diverse. We've got all these different religions represented. We said, well, we don't really believe you, but no one studied it. And so we had to go back. We had a team of 50 volunteers transcribing these prayers, all these lovely humanists, suffering through like 900 and something odd prayers. And we did the analysis, and the answer was, no, actually, they're not all that diverse. Just because you remember that one Jewish prayer a few years ago doesn't mean that religious tradition is well represented.
Right.
And, we started analyzing it, and we find that, it's disproportionately Christian, it's disproportionately religious. But we were just talking about what we were just saying about the, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought on that one.
Well, I was going to say that in my type of thinking for prehistory, I would think of them doing that as an invocation. And to me, what you're doing in the religious thing of prehistory, my thinking, would be that a shaman, when you're doing that, you are consecrating that area. In other words, like you're saying, now this thing can happen and it will be special. It's not normal now. Now it will be special. I've anointed it with
literally
prayers
blessed by the gods.
So when you come and you give your speech at the beginning, you're like, now God will hear the people's speak or whatever,
Well, yeah, so that's where I was going. You're right. So here's the thing that we look at these prayers, right? And we were trying to determine which ones are religious, which ones aren't. But the other question we wanted to ask was like, what type of prayer are they, right? Because there's some prayers that consecrate a space. There's some prayers of thanksgiving. There's some prayers that ask a God for something. Those are very problematic. And there's some prayers, and this is why we actually ended up not including this in our study, that try to do all three of them, right? So and there's more categories, by the way. Right. So they'll give thanks to a deity. So, okay, thank you, deity. Some will say like, let's be wishful. Like let's work together and try to solve our problems. Okay, fair enough. And then there's ones that'll like ask a deity for something. These sort of supplicant prayers. And that one is a real head scratcher because it's a lot of times, very often, coming from a religion that believes that this God is unchanging and their will is the way of the future. So asking this God for something seems like either a huge waste of time or it seems really disrespectful because you're challenging that God's plan, right? And so, the idea of like petitionary prayer in some religious traditions is really strange because if this God has a plan and you're asking them to change the plan, you're suggesting that your views or your desires are more elevated than the deity figure, and it becomes hugely problematic. So we ended up like it was a bunch of humanists trying to analyze these prayers on like a deep religious level. And we ended up abandoning that part of our project because our poor research assistants, basically what we had every prayer was coded by 2 researchers. And if there was a discrepancy, then a 3rd researcher would evaluate it.
Right on.
And there was, not as many discrepancies as you'd think. Is this prayer religious? Okay, it mentions Jesus, probably is religious, right? And then there were some edge cases, and we'd have discussions about them. But when it came to like, is it a petitionary prayer, a prayer of thanksgiving? It was all over the map because you really, it's really up to someone's opinion whether you're asking a god for something or you're thanking them. Give us prosperity.
One point, but it would for me personally, you said that there could be all those things and then there'd be no difference. As an axiologist, that's not possible. I mean, you could say that you have then labeled them all the same with different names, but it is impossible for them to be different categories and have no variation that would be representable. It's not logical. It cannot happen. I'm saying I'm not trying to attack your thing. It's just
I'm just
when you said that, for me, impossible. All you would say is that we have not made a methodological standard of set ideas that equal what we call whatever type of prayer. Because if you did it the way I would, axiologically, it would be like science. Boom, boom, boom. Because just so you know, I'm an axiologist first. An axiologist is a value theorist or a value scientist. And when value to us is, when you think of it, okay, it's value is worth, accuracy, truth, benefit, goodness, worth, quality, richness, depth, it's understanding, grasp. All that is when you say value.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So like we had to do, ultimately, like when you're analyzing things like this, you have to come up with categories. You create a typology, right?
Yeah,
right?
No, definitely.
You have to put things
I agreed with all that. It sounded great.
Yeah.
I was just saying that I would make the categories. We would all, as a group, we would figure out what each category
totally
make categories, because then why make them?
I mean, you totally right. So, but basically, the point we got to was like, first of all, religious groups are not decided on different types of prayer, right? And it's hard to distinguish between them all. And look, we have 970 prayers to get through. So you could conceivably, someone still can, by the way, our data set's all available online.
I'm not doing it. I could do something like that, but but trust me, I have my own stuff I'm trying to do. I need to totally figure out exactly, which I have it, but do the art for everything from millet going from China to Europe 7,000 years ago, and then basically inventing sort of, or the ideas for Indo-European.
Yeah. Also, big. Just like basically what I was saying was, at a certain point we thought, look, you could do this, and I agree, like you absolutely could, but it was a lot of work, and it would be one data point, which would be like, well, there was a lot of petitionary prayers, or maybe there wasn't as many petitionary prayers as we thought, and then ultimately, like, it doesn't really serve our goal, because our goal is to say, look, you shouldn't have prayer in these legislatures at all. It excludes people inherently, and it can't possibly represent all the faith traditions you want it to represent, et cetera, et cetera.
See, what you explained is, for me, is disvalue.
Interesting.
You show that something like hate has a disvalue in humanity.
Well, that's a good way of framing it. Yeah, because what you find is these things like, someone, we've come up against all the arguments, and someone will say, well, what's the harm? We're just trying to welcome all people. Well, you're clearly not welcoming people who have no religion, or it's not just people with no religion, it's also people whose religious traditions don't allow for prayer in public space. Right. Or if you really want to dive into it, there's a lot of faith traditions that only allow prayer when certain people are present in certain directions, when women aren't present. I mean, that's quite a common practice in many religions too. Yeah. You've got, people can't be here, they can't be there. And so suddenly your band of religions that can possibly pray in the legislature are narrowed. And then the one that I liked was, even if you're a member of these religious traditions, you have politicians doing prayer. And so what we found was they're not very good at it. And so sometimes they read off a sheet with their prepared prayers. Sometimes they make one up on their own. And sometimes they take partisan swipes. So we literally found a prayer that was like, thank God for shipping contracts, which was weird. And then there was another one which really, really confused us. The person delivering the prayer decided that they would take the opportunity to threaten a union that was currently negotiating with the government.
Wow.
And it was like, we pray that the HEU workers will find the error of their ways and come back to the bargaining table. And we're watching this thinking, are you just like ask a god to intervene and like labor negotiate? Like, God is not a scab. Like, come on now. What do you
Well,
think?
actually, if God is by Jesus, then we already know what rich people should do.
Yep.
You should sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and then you can follow Jesus. So he already told you what to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can even get into
he certainly wouldn't fight laborers.
Well, and there's that section of the Bible that says something about people not praying on street corners like the hypocrites.
It does.
Right?
Yes, it does.
It's very strange for a bunch of atheist humanists to be quoting the Bible at folks, but yeah. So one of the things that we actually talk about in our work on legislative prayer is like, look, if you're religious, it's disrespectful to your religion because whoever is doing it is not doing it right, or they're not accommodating enough people, or like religion is so narrowly banded that the First Baptist Church folks are going to disagree with the Second Baptist Church folks, and then basically
always true.
Yeah, and that's why there's a Second Baptist Church, and it basically excludes people at every level. And so with the legislative prayer in British Columbia, we actually had a bit of a win, but a small win. So we've been lobbying on this since 2018. We started the research project, and we presented our big report to the clerk in 2019 rather, and they made two changes. And these are very small changes. They don't really solve the problem, but they slightly improve it. The first was they renamed the item from prayers to prayers and reflections. And so we've subsequently been studying how that impacted the content of the prayers. And it has had an impact, actually. But also,
the even better thing, really, what I would say to them is, I got an even better idea. To make it totally inclusive, just say reflections.
Oh, yeah. No, exactly. Right.
Force them to stop saying prayer.
Right. The fact
no matter if they still give prayers, we certainly could stop the word. And because people don't get, like, understanding axiology, and it helps me understand the value of things, and words are things. They're inventions of our own minds that we build to explain and our ideas or whatever. So they mean a lot. And if you don't think so, just don't tell your kid they love them and see how much that words don't matter. Right. Just joking. But you should definitely love your kid, but tell them a lot, often, like every day. No, but so my point is, though, that once you understand and grasp the power of things, because people will say this a lot, they say words don't hurt. Like, oh, really? You haven't seen a person skilled at words then, because they can make them hurt.
Spend more time reading the comments in the news article.
Right.
Yeah, you ever been on Twitter? There's Facebook. Have you ever heard of it? No, the really good one, though, I've heard the best stuff, or the more horrid stuff, I should say, is actually on YouTube. That's where people said I should be killed and hung, and I'll just, yeah.
It's great. We could talk about the toxicity of social media all day, but what's interesting is you're totally right. Like, the fact that you rename it from prayers to prayers and reflections does two things. One, it still acknowledges prayers have a space, which is like, yeah, a reflection can be a prayer, but two, it puts prayers first. And so now you also have this idea of like, well, it's prayers and other things are guessed in this space. So
they should do it, reflections and prayers.
Yeah.
Right? Because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? If
at our municipal council meeting, we had prayers are prohibited at municipal council meetings. And the mayor here, the last inaugural meeting in 2018, had two prayers, one from a very Christian religious preacher and one from like a United Church member who gave a very secular invocation. And I talked to him, I said, look, the Constitution says and Supreme Court rulings say you can't do this. And he's like, yeah, but the second invocation was super like inclusive. And it actually, and I was like, look, it doesn't actually matter the content of that prayer. The fact that you're having a prayer treats people who don't pray as guests in that space, or the fact that you deigned to have say like, oh, well, we also included a secular prayer for folks who aren't religious is again, because it's an afterthought, you're still basically creating a hierarchy of beliefs. And that's what the Canadian Supreme Court has said for municipal prayer. Yeah. And so basically what we've been saying at and sorry, I should finish my point on the different victories in small air quotes. The second change that the BC legislature did was they used to have this sample list of prayers. So MLAs could read off the sample list, and sometimes they just read the same thing. So we do have some examples of identical prayers. And we did record, but didn't analyze like hand gestures and things like that. So they updated the list, and our report and our work was part of the consultation on updating the list. And we submitted to the clerk on this a peer-reviewed article that basically said it's impossible for you to consult on how to change prayer without violating the Constitution. It's also both practically and constitutionally impossible. And I explain why in a sec. But anyways, they updated the list. They went from 5 prayers to prayers that had sort of generic secular prayers in heavy air quotes, and then prayers reflecting various faith traditions, the major faith traditions in British Columbia. And so we said, look, like, first of all, this process is flawed because of a lot of reasons. But second of all, you should have this prayer, which actually says there is no God. And that's because the Canadian Supreme Court said that the state has a duty of religious neutrality. It can't take a stance, and that means it must remain silent. And then, of course, people who are objecting to this said, well, no, by remaining silent, it endorses non-religion. And the answer is no. Endorsing non-religion is starting a meeting with, there is no God, let's get to work. By saying staying silent, you're not saying there's no religion or we're condemning religion or non-religion. We're staying neutral. And that was kind of a critical point.
Can I say one thing about that? I'm actually anti-religious. And I tell people all the fucking time. Because I am no different than a person who is pro-religious.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, like
I do not say that any person should be harmed or harassed. In fact, when people tell me, if you were to say I'm a Jew or a Christian, I wouldn't even say anything because, now if you say it's true, wow, that's a different issue.
You're making a truth claim, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm a rationalist. You start making truth claims, my brain goes, wait a minute. But if you say I believe this, I like this, you consider it, I love Jesus, I would go, yeah.
Well, and the point is the state shouldn't be doing that, right? And the state's supposed to be the sort of neutral arbiter in this situation. And there's conversations about what is neutrality. But those conversations have been largely resolved by Saguenay. This is the Supreme Court ruling from 2015.
Right.
And it says, look, neutrality is remaining silent. And that actually deals with a lot of the concerns that people say, oh, you're discriminating against us because we can't have prayer. No, like just because we've made this place more inclusive doesn't mean you're now suddenly discriminated against. It's like we open the door to other people. That doesn't take your rights away. You just no longer have special privileges to say share your religion from the actually from the levers of the power of the state, right? So what was really interesting was the consultation process around reforming prayer. I think you guys might appreciate this. Is like fraught with peril, right? So the clerk wants to expand the sample list of prayers. So first of all, who do they ask, right? Do they ask all the religions, every sect of Christianity, 23 something odd thousand of them? Do they only pick a few religions? And then how can they possibly decide, right? And then on top of that, who do you talk to within the religion, right? Do you talk to the leaders, disproportionately men? Do you talk to the parishioners? There's a disconnect between like folk religion and hierarchical religion. And then on top of that, like how do you actually differentiate between the prayers? So if you've got two Baptist ministers submitting prayers, the state can't decide which one's better. They can correct grammar, maybe. They can maybe correct punctuation, maybe. But as soon as they make a decision and saying, well, this Baptist prayer is better than that Baptist prayer, they're making a decision like that the state has no ability to make, let alone the ability to decide. Like the clerk of the legislature here doesn't really. I mean, they're not a religious figure. They can't possibly say this is a much better prayer. The God figure will listen to it as opposed to this one. So we basically said to the province, there's no possible way to reform legislative prayer. And actually, I'm excited to say the House of Keys, the Parliament in the Island of Man, was literally debating this exact subject on Tuesday. And I got this really great email from this scholar who said, I'm a legal expert for the House of Man. And, the House of Man, the Island of Man, the House of Keys. It sounded like something out of medieval fantasy. We're currently debating legislative prayer. And you see these arguments coming up where someone's saying, like, we're the government. We can't decide what a prayer is, whether it's a good prayer or a bad prayer. And so from both a practical and legal perspective, these should be excluded. Like that was one of the fundamental points that we brought up. And of course, there was some reform, right? So our two little victories really don't deal with the broader problem, which is
there shouldn't be any. Well, the broader problem to me is there should not be any religion in any kind of, in a sense, secular system of government. I mean, I'm an anarchist. I don't really believe in government in a sense the way. Because I think about that is it's very, very complicated. So let me try to explain it as simple as possible. Just what I mean is, in a sense, is to me, everyone owns their own body. Okay, nobody else should be telling any adult what drug, food, anything. I don't give a shit if it kills them. They have the right to die. This bullcrap, it's illegal to die, to me is insane. What I also think is society has every right to try to help people that are trying to die.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's interesting.
Not lock them in jail, but try to talk to them or counsel or something, productive. Maybe help get them a job, see if they need food or, something, because a lot of times, like people, it wasn't brings up real quick. There was people on the street, right? It's homeless. And I was in counseling and they were going to have us counsel the homeless. So they started talking to us about it. They did this one study where they gave them cash. That's all they did. Just gave them cash. I think it was like $40 or something. Can't remember now. But they just gave them cash. Can't remember if it was a day or something, but I can't remember now. Sorry. But they gave them cash. And the people's, because they wanted to see like what would be better, counseling or cash. And there are people, no cash, but just counseling. Because the thought, like society is counseling would be better. Wrong. Cash was better.
Turns out cash.
Well, this is the link
Fucking cash, because their basic needs are met. They realized their basic. That's what I was saying. Is so when you're dealing with basic needs, like government should be doing, let's say, I believe, if they're going to be some just government, it should be freaking helping people. Mm-hmm. So if the government's job is to do that, there should be no prayer anywhere, not invocations of any kind from anything. Not even like I'm an atheist, antitheist, antireligionist, whatever. If I gave something, it would just be like a poem, just about caring about humanity. But I don't even think it should be that, because it doesn't belong there. Is my point.
Well, this is the challenge that we had, right? So I got a lot to say on that. First of all, like we've seen this out here on the West Coast with the housing crisis, where people who are experiencing homelessness, there's a very strong link between mental health, and you give someone a safe place to live, and suddenly it's a lot easier to deal with your mental health issues. Like it's just a no-brainer, right? If someone is living on the street and they're like
totally agree, no-brainer, in danger, exactly.
It doesn't make any sense, right? And people are like, well, we need to put these people in whatever. No, give them a house, like, find housing for people, and then we can start helping in other ways, right? And one of the things a
lot of times people are dual in a sense diagnosis or dual experience. And the fact dual diagnosis to me that you have more than one type of mental illness. Like say I have PTSD from child abuse, but I also am a sociopath also from child abuse. But I had some predisposition. Well, those are two different things that both affect my life for the rest of my life. Being sociopath, I have a harder time caring about other people's opinion. Caring about people in general. I have to fight. But see, the difference I always try to tell people, you know what I do when my mind does that? I look at it and go, fuck you, like I would tell somebody who walked up and said to me that, humans don't matter. I wouldn't go, I need to entertain that idea. No, I'd be like, what? Shut up. I don't agree with that at all. So I'm going to say it's on us. And and I don't think that to me, when you do these prayers and stuff in public, you're still the hierarchical system that somebody can stand up there and speak for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in this case, it's politicians who aren't even very good at it, right?
Exactly. They're not even the skilled ones.
I was going to add to the housing stuff. One of the other hats I wear, as I said, I chair the BC campaign for free contraception, and that's another conversation.
I used to give out when I would go to things for activism for atheists. I would give out free condoms and stuff. And
we're advocating
bans.
We're trying to make all prescription contraception free, because it's like, and by the way,
I wish I had money for that, but
but it's like these, you're talking about like housing and stability, right? You have people who are trying to make a choice between housing and their food and their school books and their contraception, and suddenly, people you were talking at the beginning of the show about freedom. It's like, well, how free is someone if they have to decide between contraception and food, right?
Yeah,
that's not freedom at all, right? And so it's really interesting how these different perceptions of freedom are deeply linked to privilege and like affluence. And
I think it's not justice. To me, you are not a just society if the weakest among you cannot feel safe.
Yeah, anyone, right? Absolutely.
You're not just.
Yeah. Well, and then just back to the prayer point. We had this interesting discussion on our research team, which was, okay, so the clerk is asking for feedback on this prayer list. And they asked us, which was nice, because usually they just ask religious folks. And so, and the BC Humanist Association is, we're a BC-based group, but we're kind of spreading out across the
I met people there because I went there, I told you.
Yeah, you would have probably met Ian and some of our crew, right? So we're having this conversation, though, and the question is like, okay, so we don't support the prayer at all. So we submit this like 130-page something report, which says you shouldn't have prayer at all. Why you're doing this? We write a paper that says this process is flawed in and of itself. But then we're like, well, we still have to submit a prayer. So we had this lovely conversation about like, what do we submit? So we decided we're going to submit something because something's better than nothing, and they're probably not going to change. It might have to go through the courts. That's a whole other conversation. And
you should read my one poem called "One Day."
Well, by the way, if you have submissions, here's an interesting thing. The city of Hamilton continues to open its meetings with prayer in violation of the Constitution. But they have a process which they think solves the problem of Saguenay, which is they'll invite members of the public to submit their own prayers. So please do send me your poem, because basically what we want to do is get some people to submit prayers to Hamilton and be like, look, you can't have this open forum, but if it is an open forum, they should be able to read anything. And that kind of comes back to what the Satanists are doing in the United States, right? And that's kind of, I mean, it's one of those situations where you're participating in the protest, but at the same time you have to criticize the protest. So it's the communications ought to have to be quite clean. Like, you shouldn't open meetings with prayer, but if you are, okay, you better extend that to the entire diversity of views, including non-religious views.
Right, but what you're explaining is axiological, so it's not. In other words, I don't see it as different. In other words, like, does science always have 100% of the information needed to make every true statement? Always? No. Sometimes they have more, and then they'll gain more, and they'll understand just a little bit better. And then people go, "Oh, it changed." Well, not really. What it did is just readjusted what it is. It's like someone says, "Oh, the Earth is flat." It's not flat. Someone else says the Earth is round. Well, it's not exactly round, right? You see my point? But round is a hell of a lot better than flat. Flat, you're just not even close to science. At least the person that says it's round is, in the ballpark.
Oh yeah, I'm team oblate spheroid all the way, like definitely team oblate spheroid. But yeah, so it's one of those. So we wrote up some prayers that were basically we used the content of Saguenay, which says that if the state was to be not neutral towards religion, they would say there is no God, or there probably is no God. So we kind of devised. I'm just trying to find them on my notes. I don't have them lying around. But basically, we devised these sort of secular humanist invocations, but we made them intentionally, I guess, a bit aggressive towards religion to kind of contrast the situation of privilege that religion normally gets, right? And you see this sort of ecumenicism of all the religions getting together and saying, "Oh, well, it's okay. We have all the religions participating," and of course, the non-religious are excluded. And so, if you're going to say, "Okay, well, you can give a prayer, but it has to be a prayer," again, you are constraining.
So when you said it was against religion, could you give me an example?
I was trying to
think of how I would do it. See, real quick for you to say it, I like to do a thing called dignity attacks. It's a way of attacking people, but it's like almost gets under the radar because you kind of know it, but you really have no defense against it because it's not. It's said in a way that's like attacking your credibility almost. People don't understand. I'd have to explain exactly.
Give an example. Yeah.
It's reason why I know how to do it. It's psychological. I understand how to use words and how to go in like a scalpel and make a cut. The cut is so fast, so in a sense perfect that you don't totally feel it, but it starts freaking bleeding. And then
give me an example.
So here's one of my favorite things. Say like you're being real mean and you think you're powerful over me. What I'll say, okay, I have a question for you. Are you a good person? That's a dignity attack.
Oh, I see. Oh, interesting. Yeah, and so in a sense, it's almost like rhetorical jujitsu in a sense.
Well, right now, what you did was you tried to reframe what I said, but then you strawmanned it, not accurately giving what I really said. What I'm doing is not jujitsu. What I'm doing is undermining your sense of safety inside.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Inside of you. Think of yourself in yourself.
Yeah.
You're looking out. I made you realize that you're in here. I see.
So yeah, it's not
back in your head.
Yeah.
You tried to be powerful and outside, but I saw you, I found you, and I pushed you back inside. And then I crawled in there and I told you, I'm in here now. You have no more power.
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, I yeah, you're interesting. Yeah.
Saying, are you a good person?
Right. Okay, yeah, you're right. It's not rhetorical jiu-jitsu. It's definitely interesting. No, that's it's an interesting like.
But anyways, I don't want to get into all that. So my point is,
yeah.
I don't have to be a good person. Just one easy one that I like to give is a powerful thing. I want everybody when a troll attacks you, don't defend anything as if they said anything that needs to be defended.
Damien, it's interesting because I do that a lot when I'm doing. I do local politics here in Saanich, right? And one of the things I try to do is, I mean, I have to interact with folks online, and as we've mentioned, it's toxic. But one of the questions I'll use is not quite the same, but I realize now that I'm doing the same thing. It's like, was that a very neighborly statement? You know,
Yeah,
and the
dignity
idea is
attack.
like,
Well,
are
you're
you being
very
a good
wise.
neighbor?
I could see your. Well, it doesn't. I could teach dignity attacks to make you better. I
Yeah,
can teach you, and also some of it is about ego. You need to be like me, truly skilled, to where you're powerful like a ghost. You just walk through people. You have to take your ego and remove it completely. It cannot be about you, because once it's about you, then you get your power back. Then you're back in your eyes. I'm not in your head no more.
no, that's it. I like that framing of
I
it.
have no ego, and I mean zero. You cannot touch it. You cannot say, I'll kill your wife or your child. You're nothing. And I just go, you know, I really worry about you. Another
Yeah.
dignity attack. Another dignity attack. Don't say anything else.
It's like radical
It's an
compassion.
innuendo. I have crawled again inside your head.
No, I feel like.
But anyways, I don't want to teach. Anyways,
Yeah.
but by the way, I'm also. I can do tons more stuff. I do not teach everything I can do because I do not want people to use it to hurt people.
Well, it's I don't know.
Just you know, the military wanted me. So did the FBI. I do not want to do that because my stuff could be used to hurt people, and I don't. And so, just so you know, I teach dignity attacks is the lowest thing that I teach. I can do way the heck more than that, but I don't do that because I feel it's almost criminal if I were to do stuff that I can actually. No, seriously, not like in other words, if I talk to you and I started making you feel sad and getting into your childhood and talking about what your dad did to you, and I remember that. Don't you know? Anyways, but
well, I just want to add, like, it's interesting. Like, I interact with trolls probably too much on social media, but often what helps. I mean, I like the idea. Like, I often say, like, you know, is this what a good neighbor would say? Like, you know, trying to take the conversation, and again, not quite getting in their head, but more like, if we were standing on the street corner, would you threaten to throw me off a bridge? Right? Like, it's probably a problem.
Right, but don't minimize. Also, don't minimize what you just did. If what I can do is like powerful as hell. So if you can do that naturally, then you're doing something powerful as hell. Don't minimize it.
Yeah, well,
it's correct.
Well, you can see how
because what I do is ethical as well as powerful.
And
if I ask you a good person and you feel terrible, have I actually done anything wrong? I haven't done anything wrong. So that's what's so good about a dignity attack. There's no defense, and I have all the power. But anyways, I don't want to get into all that.
Yeah.
My point is so. I was just saying, if I were to write a thing about the religion, I would make it swathing in dignity attacks, like all over the place. But I always say to people, but what is your goal? Is my goal shame? Is my goal empowerment? And see, the words that I use in dignity attacks can push either idea, because I can do that if I want to. I know how. I'm that skilled. I can choose how I want to push, when, where, how, who, what. But I always tell Cory, though, to me, this is a responsibility that I feel heavy on me. Believe me. That's why I help, even though I'm going through my own bullshit. I'm going through. My mom died, and I was crying, you know, like every day. But I still try to come out and teach because I know that I have something that's valuable. And I want to help others, because like we allow others to make us feel small. And then we think the only way to feel powerful is to attack, to be aggressive, to be violent. And I go, those are all weaknesses.
Well, there's this question.
I know how to do it the other way, where we can show, because you know what the kind of thing that a dignity attack does too, especially done like a master like me. The goal of a dignity attack is not to hurt. The goal is to change the position of thinking, that the person now becomes willing to want to rectify that. And then what we do as an honorable person, we allow them to rectify it, and then we thank them. The moment you feel the give, then you immediately, I really appreciate you. That's also a dignity enrichment, which is the other side of a dignity.
Interesting.
That's very thoughtful of you. I appreciate taking the time and thinking about the ideas. I can really see how you want to get this. there's a lot of commendable, for anyone who's willing to entertain an idea that, could be scary. These are all.
Well, it's interesting during like the pandemic where like one of the things I'm always trying to think of when I'm interacting with people who are, trolling or on the borderline of trolling will be sort of where are they coming from, and often it's they don't really care about the issue. So I'll give you an example. I ran a campaign here in Saanich to ban gas-powered leaf blowers. There are hundreds. There's very good reasons to ban gas-powered leaf blowers, and all the arguments that I've heard on the other side are just not very good, right? And
but I want to keep my my leaf blower.
It's like, look, you have electric ones that are just as good. The fumes poison you. You wake up the idea of transitioning away from fossil fuels alone is a good reason, right? Yeah. You'll get into these conversations with people, and you can see almost this like defense mechanism coming up, wherein like it's like, whoa. Yesterday I had a comment which was well, look around your house. How many products do you have from gas and gasoline? It's like. That is, first of all, it's a too cocaine, but also it's irrelevant because the fact that I have stuff around my house that's made from plastic is actually a good reason not to burn oil. And also, my response, of course, was we have to look around our house and see how many things depend on a healthy climate, which is pretty much everything. But what was really interesting is you see people coming at these really aggressive attacks, like they're standing hard for leaf blowers, and you're like, look, if you work in the industry, these things are poisoning you. They're loud, they're dangerous. You're spending more money fueling them, et cetera, but the visceral reaction they have is one of aggression. And so the answer, of course, is okay. We're not having a conversation about the facts now. We're having a conversation about like, are you angry about something else? And I've noticed this.
All right, so pause for a second. So you're addressing what I teach, is that when you approach somebody, you need to know what thinking state they're in.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's feelings, then there's thinking, but it's not ordered. And then there's ordered thinking, which is reason. And then there's ordered sets of reason, which is logic. And often we want to talk in logic, and they're in feelings. They're not.
That's a good way of summarizing it.
So what we do is we got to go back down the level. And I teach this. What you do is, let's say you're being emotional. What I should do is bring up something else that you're emotional about, but that you like. Like if you say, God is real, what do you mean, atheist? And I go, you know what? What is the best thing you love about God? See, I took all that passion. Can they be that angry when they tell me the best thing they love about God? So as soon as they do that, though, see, I don't care. See, this is about understanding people. I stop caring what their answer is because it doesn't matter. What I've done is switch them. As soon as they switch, no matter what they answer, I go, you know what I really want to ask you? It's back to the thing about what's logic. See, because now I already know they're out of that other thinking state.
Yeah. It's interesting because I coach high school debate is one of my many activities, and we talk about like attacking the fact, right? You can always find a slightly different stat or something, so don't do that. If you can go, you work your way down the ladder, and talking about like the deeper values is often, in high school debate.
Always talk values. I love that.
Yeah, so you're talking values, right? And so it really doesn't matter. Like the argument we use is like, look, I don't know if you guys watch Michelin Web at all.
I haven't read a lot of stuff, but by the way, all my philosophy is my own. I have not read
Mitchell Weber a comedy actor in the UK.
Telling you that, I've read 5 axiology doctoral books, but other than that, no other kind of philosophy.
Oh yeah, no, fair enough. Basically, there's the sketch we show our students, which is the kill the poor sketch, right? Where these two politicians are talking about like, well, would this help us reduce taxes? And they have this like just tongue-in-cheek conversation about like, well, would this policy like actually have an outcome? And of course, the subtext of the entire conversation is it's like it doesn't matter if it works or not; it's not acceptable, right? This violates fundamental things. And you can see the students kind of clicking into the fact that suddenly it makes sense that going after someone's deeper help, like actually exploring the values behind an argument, are the strong way of engaging with it. But I like the hierarchy you laid out there. That was really clear because you often find
see, no one taught me that. I just know that because that's kind of like how because I have 2 kinds of intelligence. You're like, well, everyone can, but like I'm in a sense genius in intellect, but also in emotional intelligence, and I have both of them. Together, which is not very common. The emotional intelligence, I'm super high. I totally get people. I can like a mind reader, like read into their minds. Because everything they do, everything they hold themselves, how they like self-touch or how they all this to me means stuff, even though not taught. I just know. I mean, and once again, I don't want people to think that I'm because I'm atheist. I don't believe in magic. No, it's not like magic. What it is I was an abused child who had to become hyper vigilant of who was around me, and then I was in areas with gangs, so I had to be hyper vigilant of every single behavior everyone might do because that could be my, getting beat up or killed. So yeah. It made me. That's why, like some people, like how did I get like fast in philosophy and thinking? Really, I was a street kid, and my life depended on it. I lived in Los Angeles and Orange County, and
Well, the way that you explained the hierarchy of thinking, I think is really it's a good way of clarifying it, because you often find that I'll bring us back to prayer, because I know we could probably go down a longer path, but people are often will do things like clinging to tradition. Right. So oh, well, we've always done this, so we should stick to it. Well, then, of course, the question is first of all, we should query our traditions, because, one of the first lines we use, which is a bit more flippant, is we have a long tradition of excluding people from politics, like not letting women vote and run, not letting members of the clergy hold office, all sorts of examples across Canada of our record on enfranchisement is pretty bad. So we need to critically look at our traditions. But then back to sort of the hierarchy we're looking at, maybe those traditions make people more comfortable. And so the question is not are you really super attached to this tradition you didn't know about until a few hours ago? Because most people don't even know that meetings start with prayer, because most people aren't political science nerds that go and watch the legislature and answer. Oh, yeah. Or if you are, you're tuning into clips. The first, the pomp and circumstance with the tricorn hat and the mace, not a lot of people will watch that every day on Hansard, because we have better things to do. Again, do love the tricorn hat, nice looking hat. But at the same time, we have other activities. But the idea of the tradition is, okay, well, maybe you support the tradition that you doesn't impact your life anyway because it gives you comfort, and you want stability in a world of chaos. And so now, like you're saying, you're back into the emotional sense of comfort, as opposed to the actual logical argument of, okay, well, now that we're including prayer, what does it look like, right? Because that is a logical conversation that, as I was mentioning, if you reflect on how you actually select a list of prayers, it's logically not really possible to do. And this classic idea of, well, everyone, if you look at everyone's religion, ultimately every person who has a religion, their religion's different, right? Two people sitting in the pews at the same church who've gone to the same church every single day. Yeah.
That's why I tell people all the time is that I don't even buy that even Christians are the same. I mean anybody, even in the same church, even in the same family. I mean, it's because it's a personal thing. So absolutely, it's a myth that you've created in your own head.
Yeah, and it's one of those, the classic challenges, right? But of course, the reason why someone might defend the prayer often becomes this visceral attack. And what was really interesting, I'll bring us back to Saguenay, because otherwise I feel like we could go down some fun rabbit holes. But in Saguenay, you literally have the mayor who is defending including prayer in these meetings, saying stuff like, I've got a quote here actually. Just a summary rather. He was doing this because he wanted to, support his religion. He overtly said, I'm doing this to support my religious tradition. And so at that point, you have someone who, again, is not really thinking about, well, what if there's my constituents are not religious? They're probably just making a political calculus that says the majority of my voters are Christian, so I'll do this prayer thing. Or they're an honest believer. They're probably a bit of both, to be fair. And they just want to defend their tradition, right? I found some of our sample prayers, by the way, that we submitted, just because I know that's where we started off. So when we were asking the clerk, saying look, here's our submissions, we had statements like, there are almost certainly no gods, therefore let us commit ourselves to tackling the challenges that face our province with reason, wisdom, and empathy. It's one of those things where, in a sense, and this may be kind of, we're trying to do two things there, right? So
the only difference, say, a dignity enrichment, a way of making people want to think of them when you read it. Don't read it. Say it like if you're guessing, because then the person who hears it, it makes them think. In other words, people hear all the time, they think I don't know how to be kind. I do. I would say it to be a dignity enrichment. I put may I be kind. May I have the courage and fortitude of conviction to put my ethics above my ego.
Oh, I see. Interesting. So it very much, that's what you're doing there, is you're personalizing it to the deliverer. Whereas in a lot of these cases.
See, when you hear it though, it's the same thing. I wrote that. When you reread that, you know what your mind hears? Like it's talking to itself. May I May I be kind. May I be empathetic. May I put my character above my ego.
It's interesting that you personalize it, because one of the things that one of the additional problems we had with, say, opening the BC legislature with prayer was the speaker previously would say, we're going to invite the MLA for Victoria Swan Lake to lead us in prayer. So there's this hierarchical
totally right. I don't like that.
Right. Whereas what
I don't try to speak for others.
Right. Well, people will say stuff exactly, and then people will say stuff like, "Well, you're banning MLAs from praying." No, you can pray anytime you want, right? Like you can go before the session, get all your prayer buddies together, get a hoop up, get all like pumped up in a circle. You can do whatever you want, right? No one's stopping you from praying. The question is leading us in prayer. Yeah. And so, what was really interesting is what you just said was like the personalizing the statement. We didn't think about that when we were drafting our prayers. To be fair, we wrote a report in like 11 days.
But to be fair, this is like the stuff that I do like every day. I bombard every single social media with dignity enrichments or dignity attacks for moral character constantly throughout every single day. That's why I'm no longer on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Also because I'll share pictures that are naked and say whatever, but not to be like Instagram was. That other ones were not naked, but Instagram, I shared pictures of intersex bodies, and it was a not sexual type of thing. It was like more like what do you call it, graph or whatever. Right. Anyways, but because I was dealing with bigots trying to tell me that because I'm intersex and trying to tell me intersex wasn't like, they're like, oh, you're just a man. I'm like, but I'm not. Oh, what do you mean? Well, I guess I have to show you some genital pictures, and then you can have an idea.
And then they report those pictures.
Well, it's not to pivot away back to my contraception campaign, but because I've been doing a lot of reproductive justice activism, I'm in that world. I've been trying to do a lot more stuff on TikTok, which is a lot more of the editing level of video that's more my style. And I interact with a lot of folks on there in the reproductive justice world. And the TikTok I was watching last night was people looking at tweets from folks who didn't understand basic anatomy, right? So, they would be like, oh, well, I thought a woman only got a period once a year. What? Like, what is once this? A year? Do we miss that section in school? Or they would exclude people with different genitals. So yes, they did. So, it's amazing sometimes the amount of education you have to do just to get to a basic level of let's explore like how actually more complex the world is than you thought it was. And the simplicity of the world is actually you don't even get it, right? Like we're having totally different conversations with different levels of information.
Yes. But because I had a big fight because I'm also genderqueer. I mean, I say male, but really the only reason I say that, just so everyone knows, is because I like cis women.
Right.
So if I don't say that and I say genderqueer, they immediately think I'm bisexual or homosexual or pan or whatever. No. So I'm classifying. I just say male because it's simpler for me not to have to assume. Then everyone, because the world is hetero, normative. Yeah. They just assume. So just like it shows how ridiculous too. All I got to do to be safe is just say I'm a he, and everything's fucking good. It's crazy as shit. But anyways, but that's not really who I am. I always get in trouble because I want to put nail polish and wear eyeliner and
Yeah.
But because I'm gender, I feel both male and female, not one or the other. I feel like I have like a mesh of both.
Sure, that's great.
But I think that being intersex in general maybe is a reason for that. Just like people that are trans, there's a reason why they feel different. In R, like me, I feel different, and I am. I put feel on there too, by the way, on my profile even for people.
Well, I was just gonna say it must be like incredibly frustrating to be gaslit by people denying that you exist, right? Like I
have a blog about it, and especially in the atheist community, I'm like, the hell. Or I love when they're telling me what the hell I am. Well, you're a woman, or you're a man, or you're this, or you're that, or intersex is a disorder, or intersex is not a real thing, or I'm like, how about shut the fuck up? You know how I learned about I was intersex? From a doctor, dickhead. I'm gonna go ahead and trust a doctor, and they're like, "Oh, did you get a second opinion?" I'm like, so yes, it's mind numbing. That's why I stopped activism, not because it's those people. It's just my mom dying, and then but also it's for me. It wasn't like my mom dying. It was for some reason that when she died, all my fucked up childhood came back. So I'm reliving all my PTSD all over again. It's like, I thought this shit was over.
Oh, so, I mean, I can't imagine that experience because that comes back to that idea of like the assumption that people can read your mind. I mean, I find it incredibly frustrating, but often that's not someone reading my mind and denying my existence. But we get that a lot as atheists, where people will say things like, well, you're not actually, it's the classic, what is it? There's the counter apologetic that basically just denies the existence. What is it? Come on now, my brain stopped working.
Presuppositionalism.
Thank you.
Oh, it's funny.
Right?
I always go, yeah, I'm cool with presuppositionalism. You mean that reason is the base presupposition for every other thing that we build, and in all other philosophies, no matter how beautiful, intelligent, or otherwise, are just a bunch of stuff, words, or ideas that we have erected on top of reason. It's not like it got a better foundation. You got a better foundation than reason?
Well, some people think they do, but of course that's a bit of a problem.
I have logic, right? And logic defends itself, or does it start with something that gets to logic?
Well, I wanted to shift things because you mentioned activism, and one of the reasons we first got in touch was a bit of activism that we're working on. So if you'll permit me, may I do a hard pivot?
Go for it.
So basically, we've been looking at legislative prayer here in BC, but like across the country, there's different practices, and a lot of provincial legislatures will start with the Lord's Prayer, or like an overtly Christian Lord's Prayer, or like a slightly different version of that. Nova Scotia just abolished the practice, by the way, like a few months ago. I had to update a book chapter we have coming out. I was very excited to do that. It's like, well, I got to go edit my book chapter now. Nova Scotia has finally decided to be something more inclusive. But that's one thing. So one of the things that we were trying to urge people to do is like, you can actually write your MLA and or MPP if you're in Ontario, and ask them to like not include this practice in the legislatures. But one of the things that we started doing was, okay, we're now going to look at whether municipalities are in compliance with Saguenay. So we looked at municipalities across the country, because my municipality, as I mentioned, Saanich here, started with 2 prayers in 2018, their inaugural meeting. And I was kind of surprised, given that Saguenay was a thing. And so we started looking at municipalities across the country, or British Columbia first, rather. And we found that there was 23 municipalities here in BC that opened their inaugural sessions in 2018 with prayer. And we wrote to a lot of them, and a bunch of them were like, whoa, we didn't know. Sorry. Like, fair enough. Saguenay, not everyone following these Supreme Court rulings as closely as we are. So we had a bunch of municipalities say,
it's possible.
Yeah, like, oh, thank you for letting us know. We had a couple of municipalities that said things like, well, we'll take it under advisement, whatever that means. And we'll find out in October, we have our next round of municipal elections, whether they did take it under advisement. And then we had a couple municipalities that said, like, no, we're going to keep doing this. We don't agree with you. We don't agree with the Supreme Court. And so that's going to likely escalate if they continue doing that practice in the future. But then we thought, look, we have this amazing research team. And by the way, I should say, like, my research team is great. Adriana, who's been working as a researcher, has literally now looked at every municipal website in the country with a population of over 1,000. Now, I don't know if you can appreciate how taxing this is, because some municipalities, like big municipalities, have functioning websites or semi-functioning websites. Some municipalities have like 7 fonts on the homepage, and it looks like a MySpace page from the 90s. Like, it is bad. So what we did is we looked at every municipality across the country, and we wanted to find out how many of them were in compliance with Saguenay. And this is the activist appeal that we have at the moment, which is basically, we found in many provinces, municipalities that continue to open their sessions with prayer, whether it's an inaugural meeting or a regular session. In a sense, Saguenay makes no distinction between those. So one of the things that we've been working on now is we're going to be releasing reports, one for each province. I think we're going to combine the Maritimes, just for simplicity's sake, with our apologies to our Maritime friends. And the territories, our data is very thin on the ground. But basically, we're going to be releasing reports for each province. And one of the things that we're looking for is people on the ground in those provinces that can help us urge and put pressure and potentially escalate efforts to remove prayer from municipal councils. Because what's really interesting with activism, and I feel you, by the way, it can get very frustrating. And sometimes, what we're trying to do is we're trying to change culture, we're trying to change beliefs.
That's what activism is all about. Is those things you just said right there. No matter across the board, is generally trying to alter some beliefs that are, in a sense, not just average beliefs, but ones that are obviously need to be changed, because activism wouldn't be done otherwise.
Right, and so, but sometimes that cultural change can take a long time, right? And like you see these changes taking place over time. But so if you're making it like a moral argument or an ethical argument, that can take time to sort of permeate through the culture, right? But if you already have a Supreme Court ruling that says you can't be doing this, it makes activism a lot easier, because now you don't have to say you have to go through the whole court process. Sure. People don't. You can't really. If someone wants to argue against you, they have to make a case to the Supreme Court now. So it kind of shifts the position of strength, where now we have the ability to say, look, no, the court says this, you absolutely have to do this. There's consequences to not doing it, which are court cases and probably human rights tribunals and things like that. And so we're basically looking for folks across the country to step up as like a local representative, to be the person to espouse their case to their municipal council. So, for example, if someone's in Saskatchewan and lives in like Prince Albert, the clerk reads a prayer at the beginning of every municipal council session, from what we can tell. If someone in Prince Albert, they get in touch, we will hook them up with our report. We'll write the press release for them. We'll work with them to work with their municipality to get that practice to end. And the numbers are pretty wild. Like in British Columbia,
if I was in Canada, I would do it, because I like doing shit.
Yeah. Well, the numbers are wild, right? So like, some places like Alberta, you've got prayers in like 8 inaugural meetings, 7 general meetings, but Ontario is the one that really is going to take a lot of effort. 158 municipalities included prayer in their inaugural meetings. And some of these, by the way, like I was reading through them all, they're not all these sort of, non-sectarian, like they're not these sort of like kumbaya statements. Some of these statements are literally, God put you in office. Now,
right.
And that to me there's so much to unpackage in some of these prayers. I was trying to find one of the quotes earlier for you, because it's, we want to thank God for selecting these people to govern over us. And there's like, okay, you've got hierarchy, you've got power dynamics, you've got theocracy. Like there's so much going on in those statements. So yeah, basically we're looking for folks to do that. But in the United States too, there's even more to be done. Like here's the wild one. In Canada, these prayers are being delivered often by an invited guest or by a counselor. So there's no cost associated with it. But in America, you have paid chaplains funded by the taxpayer. And these people are making, we were talking about money at the beginning of the show. These people are making very good money. Like, what is it? The U.S. Senate, I only have the 2018 numbers, but the U.S. Senate chaplain was getting paid $172,000. And they have a staff, right? So here's the government literally funding a religious figure. And not to defame their work, but most of the people who are religious in the Senate have their own religious people, right? So this person's job is finding people to deliver prayers, because they don't even deliver all the prayers themselves. They have some guests do it. And they're getting paid like a lot of, I consider $172,000.
That's a lot of money.
Salary.
That's a hell of an income.
And spoiler alert, back to our question about like gender and sex, they're almost all men. Actually, I think the chaplains are disproportionately, they've all been men. And then you start having other religions being invited, right? So the first woman to deliver a prayer was like 1965. The first Muslim was 92. The first Hindu was 2007. And again, it comes back to our conversation around guests. Well, we finally deigned to invite a Hindu to deliver a prayer in the Senate in 2007, right?
Out of thousands and thousands of prayers over time.
Right.
One of them.
Well, and so this is, it's really fascinating. Like one of the things we found that's quite fascinating is looking at this practice across like different countries as well. And there's, by the way, like as an academic, there's so much comparative analysis to be done there. And in the States, you have these Supreme Court rulings that say, no, we have ceremonial deism, right? And they say, look, you can still include prayer because it's not actually a prayer to a god.
Absolute nonsense, but go ahead.
Oh yeah. The idea is that it's not a prayer to a god. The god is a secular sort of like deistic figure, which should offend both secular people and religious people, because now you have an off-brand, no-name religious god that you're allegedly praying to that's not religious. That should offend every religious person. And then you have a...
That's true. Well, but then again, you get the thing. The thing is, that is, in a sense, just like a shiny object to look at, because, as you said, what it allows is for me to feel like this is a Christian nation.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it even says it's a Christian God, or listen. But I was just trying to say, what if this is Buddha? Then this is Buddha's nation. This is Hindu's nation. This is Muslims. So Damien, it doesn't. And I was just saying to you too. Just think, those people that are spiritual, not religious. What if they? I'm not saying that they would do this, but let's just say that the people that say I'm darkening their aura. What if they really were in power and could do something about people they think are darkening their auras? How freaking scary does that sound now? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it only sounds funny when they're not in power. If all of a sudden they have the power and they can go, I really don't appreciate you darkening my aura with the way that you think. And like, what?
Well, and this is basically like religious hegemony, right, and privilege. And so one of the things, I was having a conversation with a family member about this the other day, and like, what is this that underpins all of your work, right? And it's, why do you support the separation of religion and government so aggressively and doing so much research and work on it and activism? And it's because this idea of privilege has consequences too, right? Like the thing, yes, starting a municipal council meeting with prayer, the fact that someone's uncomfortable with that, it's a harm. But of course, there's all these concomitant impacts as well. So, for example, in my municipality and across British Columbia and around North America, and actually most countries based off the UK system, you have tax exemptions for religious institutions. So like out here, for example, just a few months ago, my municipality was giving out its permissive tax exemptions for places of worship. And I happened to, I pay close attention to these things, and I happened to look at the list of who they were giving an exemption to. They decided to give about a $65,000 exemption to a local prosperity gospel church. It's a mega church based out of Nigeria that doesn't believe vaccines are real, doesn't believe COVID is real, believes witches are a real thing and need to be killed, and supports conversion therapy and is deeply homophobic. And so here's $65,000 of my tax money going to this organization that's undermining health efforts, that's causing hate and direct harm to people. And so in a sense, if we allow a little bit of privilege with opening meetings with prayer, that filters through to this deeper cultural practice of just deferring to prayer. Religion, rather.
Well, but the filtering idea, I do agree with, but I think also that there's a type of, it's almost like I always saying about dignity tax, about how it's hidden, but it's still doing its work. All of us are white. All of us look like, in a sense, men, or certainly none of us look like, in a sense, weak men. You know what I'm saying? We're all talking, with our not. So our perspective certainly would be different than someone, let's just say just even men, but all super weak men. I'm not saying anything wrong with, and I'm not meaning this in like a evaluation of the better than, I was saying, like, our perspective is, they don't get the power dynamic that is constantly oppressive. Like you said about 90-1, say Hindu. That Hindu person probably feels like, oh, wow, I'm lucky I was even. Why should they feel like that?
Yeah.
Because the power dynamic set that up. So when you're saying filter, I see it as, well, it does filter, but it's way more, to me, right up in front.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
I mean, the best kind of hegemony is the kind that hides behind, that you can't see because there's a burden, a barrier of tradition and culture and practice. But you pull that curtain aside, and suddenly there's hegemony. But we notice this in so many different things, right? Like one of the I guess good things is we're never going to be out of work because our whiteboard of things we'd like to be working on is vast, right? Like here in British Columbia, we've got we were doing a research project on private schools. We have private schools that ban dancing and Halloween, and they're receiving tax dollars, right? One of the projects I'm really passionate about working on, and we're working on a report right now with the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada.
Well, then Halloween could be this and there, but dancing, come on.
I know, right? It's like an 80s film, literally, right? But we've been working on private pregnancy centers, right? Like, and to me, that's one of the projects I'm really excited about and most proud of, is like looking at how, I don't know if you guys are familiar with crisis pregnancy centers at all.
A little bit, but
a little bit, yeah. So we'll just briefly. Basically, these are heavy air quotes clinics that are set up by people who are trying to stop people from having abortions. And what they'll do is they will give biased information to direct people away from abortions. They will, in some situations, they will pose as like legitimate medical clinics.
Well, then isn't that considered like a crime?
No, because it's religious privilege, right? Because these are religious institutions, and so they're allowed to teach incorrect or slightly like biased information. We've done these analysis of their websites, and they won't mention that they don't refer to abortion services. So what you have is a clinic, air quotes again, and it looks like a health clinic. They'll have a similar logo. They'll have people in white coats that look like.
Wow, that's messed up as hell.
And they will basically provide biased information to people who are in a vulnerable situation, right? They're having a crisis, like they're pregnant, they don't want to be, or they're not sure what happened, etc. And basically, they will provide them with biased information to try to get them to not have an abortion. Now, what we should be doing is providing people with all the available information, all of the options, and then allowing them, not just allowing them, but empowering them to make that choice by having like easy access to all the different options. And what's really worrisome, and why this is directly relevant.
One second. The fact that you did that self-correction, I've told Cory about this before. I always know a good mind. That's an intellectual.
Well,
I hear someone correct themselves when they're talking, I always go, "Whoa, I like this person."
Well, thank you. I mean, we're all trying to be better and learn, right? And I find that you do have.
No, we're not. I mean,
not all of it.
All of us here, yes. Everyone, no.
The current collectivity, yeah.
Well, the current collective people, yes. All of us. All of us leaders, yes.
This has involved a lot of learning on my part. How this happened basically is I run this contraception campaign, and I've been deeply annoyed by the birthright ads they put on buses. Are you pregnant? Are you scared? We can help. And the answer is, of course, they can't help. They're going to try to direct you in a biased way and provide biased counseling, motivated counseling, which I'm sure you can appreciate is like how heinous.
I would appreciate as unethical as an axiologist. What the hell? That's just like I feel too. Even if a real counselor, they do this sometimes where they go, "Well, shouldn't we lead you in prayer stuff?" Because they go, "Well, they believe it's not your job to help them do their religion."
Exactly. Well, and
to me, it's like, anyways, that's my opinion. But
well, yeah, I this is the challenge, of course, with like having someone in a potentially trusted situation, giving
right there, trust, exactly,
information, right? And so what we originally put out a tweet that was kind of like, should these be on bus ads? And we have a publicly funded transit system. This seems problematic. And journalists got in touch. And I suddenly was like, well, actually, I don't know that much about crisis pregnancy centers. So I took a deep dive into the literature for like 2 days of intensive research and got in touch with some of my friends from the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada. And they've been doing this report looking at these different crisis pregnancy centers. And to make the long story short, we're now updating that report and looking at their websites to see which ones will provide accurate information. I mean, some of these websites will claim they do an abortion pill reversal, which is not a thing. No. And it's just overtly lying to people, or they'll make these false
claims. And once again,
I said they'll make
like false representation laws or something.
This is the idea. So they'll make false claims about like breast cancer and abortion or post-abortion syndrome. And the thing is, there might be some laws, right? But these organizations are very clever. So we looked into this, right? So you can't lie in advertising, right? But they're not technically lying because the lie takes place in the counseling chamber, right? The lie doesn't take place in the ad. The ad just says, "Are you pregnant? Are you scared?" Anyone can put that ad.
Right, they're doing the dignity tax.
These people have very good lawyers, and they walk that very narrow line, right? And so what we're doing with our research right now is we're producing a report for British Columbia where we look at each crisis pregnancy center as an individual. And we look at ways that it's problematic, which maybe its website doesn't include abortion referrals. Maybe they make these false claims around health impacts, et cetera. And we're also looking at things like zoning bylaws. So if your clinic is zoned as a medical clinic and you're a crisis pregnancy center, you may not be allowed to receive tax exemptions as a medical clinic because you're not a medical clinic. You're a dangerous counseling service. And so we're kind of looking at each one individually, and they have to be taken on individually. And our goal is then to provide access to information to activists on the ground who can then say, okay, my local crisis pregnancy center is zoned as a medical clinic. It's not. I'm going to talk to the city council about changing that. Or this crisis pregnancy center is offering ultrasounds. They legally can't do that without X, Y, and Z. Therefore, we're going to talk to the right people and make sure that they don't do that anymore. But back to our original point, why I kind of went off in this this tangent, was this all comes back to religious privilege, right? The fact that you're saying, like, can we do anything about them? You kind of can't sometimes because these clinics are able to use the shield of religious freedom. Although I must say Canada's made some improvements. We just had national legislation passed banning conversion therapy. And that's become it actually cost one of the leader of the Conservative Party his job because he realized, like, maybe we should do this. This is a normal human thing to do. This is abuse, etc. And basically, there was some pushback. And you're thinking, no, like, we're talking about abusing children. This is not okay. You shouldn't be, supporting these organizations. But then the wild thing, of course, is that the state is still supporting many of these organizations through tax exemptions. So it all comes down to the idea of privilege and hegemony, and slowly chipping away at it, I guess. And I say this a lot in our contraception campaign, where it's like, look, the roots of the patriarchy run deep. We have to chip away at them as best we can. But the approach I've tried to take is sort of smaller, bite-sized chunks. So rather than say taking on the patriarchy, head on, we're looking at, okay, we're going to take small policies and kind of chew around the base, and ideally it'll eventually collapse. the same thing with religious hegemony and privilege.
And I'm also trying to go against the patriarchy. And one of the ways that I do it constantly is I use all their terms for good things that actually are not anything they like. In other words, like kindness. I'll say the most courageous thing I've ever done was be kind. In other words, I take their manly and I make it about the most sensitive.
I think that it's an interesting thing that came up. I play ice hockey, and last night we had a game that was late, and I was reflecting on this, like the different kind of characters people will play. Like on the ice, you're all raw, and like there's a lot of like intense masculine energy is the right term, but a lot of aggression. And then of course in the locker room, one of the guys is like talking about going back to like read to his kids, right? And you see this interesting kind of like. I mean, I'm just reflecting on the way that we all have different ways we interact in different public settings.
Well, I just find that well, and I'm not right. I'm obviously can be both aggressive and kind, and so I mean, I'm not saying that we should value, only to be kind and never. Sometimes
there's a time to be. Oh, there's absolutely a time to be aggressive. Absolutely.
Sometimes it's appropriate, and sometimes it's absolutely not ever appropriate.
But I like that idea of kind of tapping into that, like. The way that you're kind of getting inside people's heads and saying like, well, actually, let's explore that. And what is your, like, what you want to, I feel like it's asking people don't often have these conversations about like these deep values, like who do you want to be? Correct. Or I mean, literally we're going back to like classic philosophy.
You get it.
A good person, right? See, and we don't have that conversation very often. We're too busy focused on like the individual small policies, but underpinning all that is this sort of values thing of like, if you want to be good, what would a good person do? And now we're getting into classic, Well,
and that's what I try to do with all my stuff. When I tell people that the biggest thing that I try to teach is to be a good person, because I know once you understand that, the honor that it is for me to be a good person, I already do that which is good.
Yeah,
and I strive for that.
And that's quite radical, I think, these days, insofar as we just don't have
very
that kind
radical,
of thought, right?
Well, someone tried to tell me the other day that kindness was, because I always say, I said kindness takes a high level of courage. He goes, no, it doesn't. I go, yes, it does. Look at the person is fighting me about being kind.
Yeah.
And then I go, kindness is rejected as weakness in this world. It is an act of courage.
Yeah.
To be kind anyway.
Well,
and not only that, I try to show people, what I was trying to explain about dignity. If you read, I have a whole thing that tells how to do all the stuff I do. Well, not everything I do, but stuff that I allow people to do. Let's put it that way. Well, because I'm not going to. Well, the reason I say this because I was going to teach a lot more, but I told it to someone who said, "Wow, I could use this to make women have sex with me," and I said, "I'm not going to teach this stuff."
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just thinking when you were talking about that, I was immediately thinking of like
I didn't say that on the video. I would have to delete the video.
I was thinking of Strauss as the game, right? There's all these like dangerous techniques that you're thinking like these are incredibly manipulative. Like you could use them to be more compelling, speaker, but also like these are really manipulative, right? But like back to
like in counseling, they talk about it like transference and counter-transference. But to me, a skilled counselor should be doing this because that's what, in a sense, and this is totally what they're doing when they do role play, which is why I usually by talking. Can get into people's head by doing is I role play kind of almost like I involve you and me in a role play, but I never ask you a question. But you actually feel as if we both just did something, but only I did it. But you think it was a joint experience, but it was always only me.
Interesting.
So, but anyways, like I said, so I always tell Cory, did I not say this before? People should go and watch all of my videos.
Yeah, that's right.
Dude, I am very smart and have figured out a lot of stuff. Not because I want to be an ego, but because I'm giving all of this knowledge to empower you. I'm an anarchist. I don't want to be your leader. I want to be someone that awakens your own fire.
Well, I was going to say, I probably should wrap up here in a bit, but I was going to
definitely.
say, if people are... to do a plug myself, if I may. If people are interested in reading a lot about research, the BC Humanist Association we got research on our tax work, on the crisis pregnancy stuff is coming out. We're doing an edited book coming out, hopefully, in the near future. And all the stuff that we've done on legislative prayer is all on our website, bchumanist.ca. And people want to look at my work, it's at Teale.ca, Teale with an E. And basically, first of all, encourage people to look at the research. And if folks are looking to do a bit of activism on the ground, wherever they are around things like legislative prayer, like get in touch, because we've now been doing this for 3 or 4 years. And basically, I like the idea of, I guess this is my own personal philosophy on this, is doing good empirical and good research, and then using that research to get positive change in the world. Now, there's other approaches.
Hold on a second. Are you saying a rational person would not come to that conclusion?
I mean, I know.
So, in a sense, not only is it empirical, it's logical in the sense also that it's a logical extension that would occur.
Well, I mean, I like the idea of saying, like, look, we put, for example, all of our data out on our legislative prayer stuff, because, we started this conversation talking about, like, well, how do you classify these prayers? Someone else might classify them differently. So, for example, like our criteria for
opinions,
right? But like, let's say you're building a typology, right? Like, we can have a debate within a field and say, like, I think this category is actually 2 categories or 1, and maybe you should be more. There's more nuance. Totally fair, right? But for us, it's like, here's the data. If you want to analyze it yourself, go for it. We had very conservative categories for our research because, we're not going to go, for example, like we had this situation where some of the prayers, they might mention the word Lord, right? And that's not enough to tip that prayer into our Christian category because other religious traditions use the term Lord. It probably is a Christian prayer, but like, we couldn't be sure. So we'll be conservative and say it's non-satanic.
Yeah, they do say Lord Buddha, and they do say Lord Krishna.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we're trying to be as conservative as possible. But the idea is basically, taking, good research that helps us better understand the world, and then using that to say, like, let's change the world for the better. So yeah, I was going to say, if people want to read our research, some of it's a bit long, some of it's not. I'm quite a long-winded person. I think you can probably commiserate. And yeah, and the other thing too is like encouraging people to do that kind of work when they're interested in activism. One of the biggest frustrations that we have is someone will get upset about something like, for example, prayer in a municipal council, and they'll try to defend themselves in court. And they're not a lawyer. And of course, that case doesn't go as well as it could, or it goes poorly because they didn't have the kind of support. Or, people will get upset and try to do something really quickly, but with a bit more time, a bit more research, we can come up with the optimal approach to achieve a maximally beneficial outcome. So that's kind of what I would hope people would do. But yeah, the BC Humanists, we've got reports coming out from municipal prayer across Canada. We actually have I think the book chapter is coming out very soon. We looked at how the prayers in British Columbia changed after those 2 structural changes I mentioned. So after they went from prayers to prayers and reflections and expanded the list, there was actually some interesting changes. But it was kind of, that book chapter is coming out pretty soon. And yeah, I think overall, just encourage people to, if they can, when they can, in whatever their way, fight for a more, fight for separation of religion and government, and against these kinds of forces like hegemony and religious privilege that have all these concomitant harms on us, both, philosophically and physically.
Well, I really appreciate it because people, I think, don't grasp that, like I was saying about, if all of us being white or all of us being a certain kind of man, or presenting or whatever. My point is that it is important to get this out there and to hear different voices. And it's important to address things that people, that's why I really appreciate what Cory does. And I totally appreciate what you do, because we need to speak about the things that people don't talk about. And I don't agree that the people think that these little things don't matter. And I go, really? Because if you think about you and your loved one, what's the things that matter the most? The really big things or all the little things? Could you take all the little things away and then only the big things would matter? I mean, that's just ludicrous.
Yeah, and on the little things too. You're talking about, like, you're talking my language, my friend, because I've been doing activism on a wide range of things, and climate change is a huge issue. Or like I work in illegal fishing, right? That's one of my main area of expertise is looking at.
Dude, you're on the right show, because that's what this whole show's about, man. Everything you're talking about, yep.
Yeah, well, and so one of the challenges, I'm talking to someone the other day, well, climate change, right? And it's like, okay, well, we have 2 solutions to climate change. One is massive system change, which is going to be messy and quite hard, and it's pretty hard for an individual to advocate effectively for that. I mean, we should be looking at changing our system, or thousands of little changes in thousands of different ways. Now, I'm an individual. I got my different teams I work on. Is it easier for us to say change the entire global system, or is it easier for us to sort of chew on smaller parts locally? Now, large system scale would be amazing, and we need it ultimately to survive and protect our planet. But we can only, as individuals, work on these smaller issues. And the other thing too, and this is, I think, comes back to the point about like the challenges of activism, is those small steps you can also build in victories and build momentum. So I was running a campaign in the UK to ban shark fins. And we started off with banning them in one city and then banning them in another city. And you build momentum, and the team grows, and the team gets confident. And your first like the woman I worked with, her first campaign was a victory. We got our local council to ban shark fins. And it wasn't very challenging because there weren't very many restaurants that served shark fins in the city. And all of the politicians in the local council were bending over backwards to support the policy. We actually were worried they would fight amongst themselves. And then, of course, this wonderful woman founded a national organization campaign to ban shark fins. And so you get these little victories and you build up. So like, for example, our campaign on free contraception, someone was complaining on TikTok, like, well, there's bigger issues. Absolutely. Like, the patriarchy is a huge problem, and there's tons of abuse and inequality and injustice. But we have the contraception policy. It's an amazing policy. There are no arguments against it that are deeply rooted in misogyny and sexism. It saves money. So all these fiscal conservatives that would say, well, I don't want to be paying for someone else to have sex. Well, it's going to save our government $95 million, bro.
Yeah.
Oh, and suddenly their argument's been just slipped out from underneath them.
Yeah.
And so but first you get.
Well, they still might have arguments. You just mean they're legitimate ones, or they're justified ones.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I should rephrase that.
Someone else can get behind with reason.
Yeah.
Well, the people who make those bad arguments also tend to lose their jobs. We had a politician who literally was not elected because he decided to say some really inappropriate things about our policy and our campaign. But the point is, you've got this manageable policy that's easy to communicate, it's straightforward. And then, of course, once we've done that, we move on to the next barrier to contraception, or we move on to the next barrier issue around equity. But the team, and this is the last thing I should probably leave you with, is we've got this team of like 70 volunteers on the contraception campaign. And the vast majority of them are like health practitioners who have that lived experience of working with people who like won't ask for contraception because they can't afford it. Or one of my colleagues, she's an OBGYN, and she will have women who are like having a pregnancy and talking about why they didn't want it, but they had no options or can't get access to contraception. And the challenge you run into is these amazing people don't necessarily have the skills to do activism. So when you work with doctors, they don't know how to write a press release. They spend their whole life trying to save lives, right? Yeah. And so the really cool thing about our team is we've assembled this group of people, and we're all about, first of all, shine theory, but also about like equipping people on the team with the skills necessary for the next fight. Because once we've got free prescription contraception in our province, we want it in every province, and then we want it in other countries. But we also want to fight other injustices, and so we equip the people on the team.
Right, we should definitely have you on again, because we need to go. And I don't want to cut you off.
Well, I would love. By the way, I would love to bring some of my team on.
Oh, absolutely!
Speaking of white,
we can have a whole 8 people and have a session. I love thinking.
Well, I mean, the
deep thinking is like big time.
Well, and again, like I'd love to get some of the people in the campaign, because we have people who are not white and male presenting, and the perspectives they bring, I think, are really eye-opening. Like the stories that you hear. Yeah,
you don't even have to defend that. You're on the right show, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, I've got to actually run off to a road safety rally. So too many people are getting hit by cars in our city.
I was going to say to you, I wouldn't just say that you have that one thing that I really appreciate: moral courage. A lot of people have physical courage and think that that's a big deal, but it's not really a big deal. Shitloads of people have that stuff. They'll die physically, but moral courage, oh man, that's rare.
Thank you. Yeah, but I thank you very much. Value that.
So anyways, go ahead and Cory, and plug your show and stuff so that we can get on out of here.
Sure. It's just The Mind of a Skeptical Leftist, available on all podcast apps or my YouTube channel.
Right on.
It was great chatting with you folks. And let's do it again. Seriously, let's talk.
Yeah, set it up. And if you want to bring some people, definitely. We're totally cool about that.
for sure.
Hey, this is like the most incredibly relevant these days, especially with what's going on in the United States with reproductive access. But yeah, thank you guys so much. It's really lovely chatting with you folks, and we'll do it again soon.
Yeah,
You
right
bet.
on. Definitely. Well, get with Cory, and he sets up the show. So,
That's right.
yep.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Have a great rest of the day here.
All right.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, agnosticism, atheism, antitheism, antireligionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheist can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudo-history, pseudo-morality, things that are found in religion. I support realism, axiology, of course, liberty, justice, ethics. I am also an anarchist socialist. I support anarchism and socialism, progressivism, liberalism, philosophy, psychology, archaeology, and anthropology, advocating for sexual, gender, child, secular, LGBTQIA+, race, class rights, and equality. So if you can guess from all that, I support or challenge that I have an eclectic variety of videos on a variety of topics. Please take time to check them out. As well as if you enjoy them, please give them a like. And don't forget to subscribe, as new things are on their way all the time for my channel.
Take care. Thanks, Cory.